Chapter 870. In the magma lake, where Wu Ming and Az Dakaha were located, Aziz Dakaha was forced to freeze. Golden chains extended from the lava lake and wrapped around Aziz Dakaha's body, locking him tightly in the air. However, the chains did not lock him in from all directions. Although it was strange, Az Dakaha could not move. At the same time, the Karina of the hegemon was also locked by Aziz Dakaha. This is. Even though Az Dakaha was immobilized by the golden chains, he could still speak. My Karina. In his free time, Aziz Dakaha still had the time to marvel at the disappearance of his gift. At this moment, Wu Ming's voice entered Az Dakaha's ears. What a pity, Az Dakaha. Az Dakaha looked down. Wu Ming was still soaked in the lava lake, but the cracks on Wu Ming's body were getting bigger. It looked like he was about to disappear. Is this the power of the origin power? It is indeed powerful, ha ha ha. Az Dakaha was not depressed about being captured. Instead, he laughed loudly. There is no choice. If you could realize that everything I did was for my body, you would not have lost. Az Dakaha was one of the strongest people in the box court. Moreover, he had the origin black soil. Az Dakaha had the ability to stop Wu Ming from finding his body. That's right. Wu Ming's goal from the very beginning was to find his body. Wu Ming did not want to cause trouble for Az Dakaha. He only wanted to find his body after saving Shadora. In the end, Az Dakaha attacked Wu Ming. Wu Ming and Az Dakaha fought for a day in the Devil's Den just to find out if Wu Ming's body was in Az Dakaha's body. After confirming that his body was hidden in the form of a ball of light in Az Dakaha's heart, Wu Ming began his plan. He used the fog to cover himself and approached Az Dakaha at lightning speed. He used a power that even his spirit base could not withstand to attack Az Dakaha. He wanted to break open the black soil around Az Dakaha's heart and reveal his heart. Once it was revealed, everything would be easy. At an extremely close distance, Wu Ming and his body would form a connection. Wu Ming's consciousness would then be able to return to his body. The moment he returned to his body, Wu Ming felt that his injuries had healed. The black soil was also expelled from his body. Coincidentally, Wu Ming's origin power of the Sun Avatar had the power of the origin power of the 7 avatars. The last trace of the black soil was removed from his body. As a result, Wu Ming was completely liberated. A voice that could not be understood by the box court world sounded from the lava lake. Although it could not be understood, the voice had a strong penetrating power. Not only did the people around the 54,545 outer gate hear it, but the entire North District, the entire box court, from the no name to the upper levels of the box court, it could be said that everyone in the box court heard it. The experts hidden in the box, such as the 3 digits, and even the rare 2 digits, all looked in a certain direction. That direction was the place where the voice came from, the North District's middle outer door of the 54545. Anyone who heard the voice could understand that a powerful existence that they could not afford to offend had come to the box. In the middle of the lava lake of the outer door of the 54545, a huge white figure slowly rose from the lava lake. It was a huge dragon, a dragon that could cover the entire outer door of the 54545. Because of its huge size, this figure only revealed its head, shoulders, and some of its claws. At this moment, Wu Ming was sitting on the dragon's head, paralyzed. To be honest, after my body was affected by the black mud, it unexpectedly grew a step further. Wu Ming said as he touched his head. The dragon, on the other hand, had some strange feelings. After all, the dragon was Wu Ming, another him touching his own head was very strange. Wu Ming had already mastered the ability to control 2 bodies with one consciousness. After his consciousness entered the main body, the originally abandoned spirit base was once again used by Wu Ming. However, it was about time for this spirit base to be used. Bang! Like glass shattering, Wuming on the dragon's head instantly shattered, turning into little magic particles and returning to the world. Now, it was time to deal with the problem of Az Dakaha. I have to say, Az Dakaha, you are the second strongest person I have ever met, but in the end, you will still be defeated by me. The dragon spoke slowly. Unlike Wuming's youthful voice in the spirit-based state, the dragon's voice sounded somewhat ancient. However, this was his real body, which gave Wuming a strong sense of belonging. At the same time, Wuming raised his dragon claw. Countless golden chains wrapped around the dragon claw, extending down to the bottom of the magma lake and wrapping around Az Dakaha's claws. That's right, this was the one that had entangled Az Dakaha, Wuming's heaven's lock, Enkidu, the one that had not evolved before the root had obtained it. The 5 fingers of the dragon claw moved slightly, and Az Dakaha, who was bound by the heaven lock, could not help but descend and was about to land on the dragon claw. However, Az Dakaha wasn't going to give up so easily. Activate Avesta. Counteracted in turn, simulate in another cosmology. In an instant, Az Dakaha once again activated the simulated universe in an attempt to break free from Wuming's control. However, there was a flash of light, and 4 or 5 golden swords instantly pierced Az Dakaha's body. The simulated universe that had just been activated immediately lost its effect. As for Az Dakaha's other blessings, they were all sealed by the strengthened golden sword. By the way, as soon as Wuming's consciousness returned to his body, he activated a total of 12 avatars. What's this? Az Dakaha exclaimed in surprise. The golden sword that split the godhead, one of Welislana's 10 avatars. If one were to say that Velislana's authority was fused with Mekhal's authority and was modified by Wuming to suit himself, then the golden sword was the only authority that could still see the shadow of Velislana's authority. It was no wonder that Az Dakaha was so shocked. He now realized that many of the abilities that Wuming used were similar to Welislana's avatars. When I killed Welislana in the other world, I obtained his authority. After fusing and modifying it, it has now become my one and only authority, Wuming explained casually. To think that I would lose to the same move again. This is fate. Az Dakaha chuckled quietly. However, Az Dakaha still had some tricks up his sleeve. Pucci, Az Dakaha's blood vessels seemed to have exploded, and black liquid began to flow out of his body. It was the source of the black mud. Wuming's son had removed the black mud from Wuming's body, but Wuming did not remove the black mud from Az Dakaha's body, so Az Dakaha still had the power of the black mud. However, this was also Az Dakaha's biggest failure. Because mutual restraint means that I can deal more damage to the creature that is possessed by the black mud, Az Dakaha. Chapter 871. Wuming's formless power of origin continued to flow from his body to his dragon claw. Countless white flames were born. This was the fire of origin produced when the concentration of power of origin reached its peak. It could cause obvious damage to the black mud. The black mud gushing out of Az Dakaha's body seemed to have met its natural enemy. It was constantly being burned by the flames, and as the black mud erupted from time to time, the flames would also burn fiercely from time to time, increasing the efficiency of the flames. But no matter what, the result would not change. The black mud gushing out of Az Dakaha's body would inevitably be burned to ashes by the white fire of origin. Not only that, but even the Enkidu that locked Az Dakaha in the sky was filled with a large amount of power of origin. Roar! Az Dakaha couldn't help but let out a painful roar. If you didn't use the power of the black mud, you might be able to live a little longer, Wuming said regretfully. Unlike the state of the spirit clone, Wuming's power of origin was beyond imagination. And this endless source of power was the black mud of Az Dakaha. It could be said that it was the nemesis of the black mud. It was like seeing a fire and trying to extinguish it with straw. The straw would only be burned by the fire. If Az Dakaha had released all the black mud in his body in his previous state, it would have been easier for Wuming to deal with him. But unfortunately, the black mud on Az Dakaha's body had been greatly reduced by Wuming's sun. But this had no effect on Wuming. Gradually, Az Dakaha's body turned pure white. That was the original color of Az Dakaha's body. It seemed that the black mud on Az Dakaha's body was almost completely burned away. Otherwise, the black mud would have been able to wrap around Az Dakaha's body. Roar! Az Dakaha didn't answer Wuming's question because the burning of his origin power was causing him so much pain that he wanted to die. He kept howling. Wuming could understand this kind of pain. When Gidia had detonated the black mud and injured Wuming, Wuming had also experienced this kind of pain. It was not only physical pain, but also mental pain. It was as if there was no solution, and he could only passively endure it. It was as if he was in hell. Although what was being burned was the black mud, Az Dakaha still felt pain. As long as there was a trace of the black mud left, he would not be able to escape this pain, this extremely fatal pain. I have indeed lost. Az Dakaha was finally able to speak instead of howling. Perhaps because the black mud had been reduced to a minimum, Az Dakaha's body had basically turned white. Only a trace of black could be seen on his limbs. Wuming quietly looked at Az Dakaha and did not interrupt him. Instead, he waited for him to continue speaking. However, after Az Dakaha finished speaking, he did not speak again. It was as if he had run out of energy and could not speak. Gradually, the black mud completely disappeared. The flames of the origin were also extinguished because of the disappearance of the black mud. Az Dakaha's dragon body turned from black to pure white. His shadow wings also disappeared. He was now like a three-headed lizard, locked in Wuming's dragon claws by the heavenly lock. Reality proved that the black mud had indeed been completely burned away by the flames of the origin. Under Wuming's command, the celestial lock loosened slightly. The pure white three-headed dragon that was still unable to escape the celestial lock, its four limbs drooped loosely towards the ground. Az Dakaha's left and right heads also drooped naturally. Only the head in the middle seemed to be struggling helplessly before it slowly lifted its head. Its black and white eyes carefully looked at Wuming. Then, Az Dakaha spoke. Dragon of Origin, this is indeed your victory. However, absolute evil, that you killed will still be born. This is a trial that humans must overcome. As someone who had temporarily become Wuming's kin because of the black mud, Az Dakaha now clearly understood what the Dragon of Origin was. At the same time, Az Dakaha no longer called Wuming an enemy. Because now, he was the final human trial's absolute evil Az Dakaha without the black mud. He was no longer Wuming's kin. Your identity and status are indeed above the world. However, the world will not completely give in because of your interference. Even if I cannot be resurrected, a new absolute evil will be born for humans to test. As Az Dakaha spoke, his head in the middle gradually lowered. You don't have to worry about the future. Wuming did not have any ill intentions. He was just stating the truth. As he was about to die, he could not see the future. Ha ha ha. You're right. Being able to let go of everything and enter a deep sleep is not bad, Az Dakaha laughed as he looked at Wuming. He began to talk to himself. It's a pity that humans did not surpass me. With that, Az Dakaha's head drooped down, and there was no more movement. He's already gone. Although Az Dakaha looked like he was asleep, he was indeed dead. At this moment, of the two dragon horns on Wuming's head, the one at the back shone. The light shone on Az Dakaha's body as if it was scanning him. Then, a cold but slightly emotional female voice entered Wuming's mind. Master, it's confirmed that AZ Dakaha is mentally dead. Thank you for your hard work, Collis. Wuming's voice was filled with emotion. The female voice that appeared in Wuming's mind was Wuming's magic attire. It was an extra sister machine of the same model as Ilia's Ruby and Mayo's Sapphire Sophia, Lapis Collis Balit. This crown-style magic attire followed Wuming's body to the box garden world. Of course, Enkidu also came with it. After confirming that Azi Dakaha was dead, the heavenly lock around Azi Dakaha's body was dispelled. Then, it wrapped around Silent Dragon's arm and returned to its original position. Thank you for your hard work, little N. Wuming's hard work was indeed related to the two of them helping to deal with absolute evil and checking on absolute evil's death. But more importantly, it was Wuming's gratitude to Enkidu and Collis for protecting his body in the box garden world. He thanked them for protecting him. Chapter 872. What was there to protect? Because Wuming saw it. After all, it was the experience of his original body, so Wuming, who had returned to his body, would naturally see the past experience in an instant. If he had to say something, it could be said that this was the only special vision. At this moment, Wuming slowly closed his eyes, preparing to digest the things he had seen before. The moment Wuming returned to his body, he saw all the experiences of his body in the world of the box court. However, because AZ Dakaha was still in front of him, Wuming did not look at it in detail. Now that AZ Dakaha had been destroyed, Wuming could read it again. Back then, when the box court had just been established, Wuming's body fell from the sky into the box court, and coincidentally, it fell at the location where No Name used to be. At that time, No Name had not yet established a community in that location, and the surrounding area was even a wasteland. Of course, most of the areas in the box court's early days were wastelands, because there were not many people in the box court when it was first established. Especially the outer sect with the lower numbers, it could be said that in the beginning, there were unimaginably few people in the 7-digit outer sect. Similarly, because the box court's early system had not yet been established, the box court could be said to be very chaotic at that time. Wuming, this thing that exuded a powerful aura, also attracted a lot of attention. Many forces and even individuals came to the 7-digit outer sect to investigate, but the result was naturally to no avail. As for why, it was because they could not find any abnormalities. It was because the Black Origin Mud covered up Wuming's aura, and the Black Origin Mud sealed Wuming together with it. At that time, Wuming's consciousness had already returned to the Big Origin, so naturally, he could not move. However, Wuming's body was still suffering from the corrosion of the Black Origin Mud, so Collis and Enkidu combined the power of the Black Origin Mud in Wuming's body to create a light membrane. They turned Wuming's body into a ball of light, sealed him together with the Black Origin Mud, and buried him deep underground to prevent the Black Origin Mud from flowing out. The two of them had experienced a lot with Wuming, and had seen the power of the Black Origin Mud. In their opinion, if Wuming had consciousness at that time, he would have made the same choice. The facts prove that this was indeed the case. If Wuming still had consciousness at that time, he would have let the two of them seal the black mud together with his own body if there was no other way, so that the black mud would not leak out. However, in that case, the Black Origin Mud could only continuously corrode Wuming, who was also inside the ball of light. Wuming did not think much of it. After all, his injuries could slowly recover, but those who were injured by the Black Origin Mud would not be healed so easily. This was also one of the reasons why Wuming did not want the Black Origin Mud to flow out. Fortunately, the Black Origin Mud was boundless water and did not have a source. Once it was drained, it would completely disappear. In addition, Wuming's body was constantly producing origin power, so Wuming's body did not suffer too much damage. At most, he would feel a little pain. However, since Wuming's consciousness was not in his body, he naturally could not feel any pain. Therefore, Wuming did not blame Kalas and Enkidu for Wuming's actions. Although this was the case, Kalas and Enkidu had always placed Wuming first. If they did not understand Wuming, the two of them would not have chosen to seal the black origin mud and Wuming's body. Instead, they would have allowed the black origin mud to flow into this world and protect Wuming's body from harm. However, if they did that, Wuming would definitely be furious when he found out about their actions. Therefore, the two of them chose to seal the black origin mud and Wuming's body. However, they did not choose to sacrifice Wuming for the sake of the world. Kalas and Enkidu both understood that if they did that, Wuming's body would continue to be corroded by the black origin mud. Although it would not kill Wuming, it would still cause serious injuries to him in the end. Therefore, after the two of them chose to seal Wuming's body together with the black origin mud, they also chose to take the damage for Wuming. As Wuming's personal belongings, even if the two of them chose the world, they would not give up on Wuming. The true meaning of being Wuming's personal belongings was to have both of them. Within the sphere of light, Enkidu extended his chains to their maximum length, completely wrapping around Wuming's body, while Kalas converted all of her mana into 100% defense, buffing Enkidu and Wuming's bodies. As a result, most of the black origin mud's connection with Wuming was severed. Only a small portion of the black origin mud in Wuming's body was still corroding Wuming's body. However, the endless amount of origin power he produced resisted it, so Wuming's body did not suffer much damage. However, Enkidu and Kalas suffered greatly. As existences who had followed Wuming for a long time, they had also produced a trace of origin power when they were in the origin. It was by relying on this trace of origin power that the two of them were able to resist the corrosion of the black origin mud and protect Wuming's body. However, it was precisely because they had origin power that the two of them continuously endured the pain brought about by the black origin mud. By the way, Kalas had used her ability to scan Wuming's consciousness and determined that Wuming's consciousness had automatically returned to the backup machine in the origin because he could not bear the pain brought about by the black origin mud's explosion. Also, although the explosion had also affected Enkidu and Kalas, the two of them were unexpectedly only slightly affected by the explosion, while Wuming seemed to have taken the brunt of the damage caused by the black origin mud. Under the circumstances where they were not injured, the two of them chose to seal the black origin mud and Wuming's body, protecting both the world and Wuming's body, while quietly waiting for the day when Wuming would find his body. It had to be said that Wuming was quite angry when he saw this scene. What they did was no different from slow suicide because they could not resist the corrosion of the black origin mud at all. If possible, Wuming really hoped that the two of them would have allowed the black origin mud to corrode Wuming. Although it was impossible to guarantee that the two of them would not be corroded by the black origin mud, they could have attracted a lot of firepower. Although it was just a guess, it made sense that Wuming had attracted the firepower when Gidia detonated the black origin mud. After all, Wuming was a good fuel for the black origin mud. Even if he had to take a lot of damage, it would not have been a big deal. After all, Wuming's body could produce an endless amount of origin power, so he was not afraid of the black origin mud. At most, he would be seriously injured. Speaking of which, it was really strange. Kalas and Enkidu were willing to sacrifice themselves for Wuming, while Wuming, who saw this scene, was also willing to let himself attract the firepower. It was really contradictory. However, it was also because of this that the bond between Wuming, Kalas, and Enkidu was manifested. It was also because of this that Wuming said emotionally to the two of them, "Thank you for your hard work." But in the end, the two of them still survived. Even if Wuming's consciousness was not present, he would not just wait for the two of them to suffer continuous damage and slowly die. This was because Enkidu's body, chains, and Kalas's body, crown, were tightly attached to Wuming. Because of this, the origin power in Wuming's body seamlessly acted as a reinforcement. The origin power was transmitted to the two of them, allowing them to successfully resist the Black Origin Mud and survive until now. Because of the Black Origin Mud, Wu Ming's aura had been concealed very well. Many people who had established a community in the outer sect of 2105380 did not discover any traces of Wu Ming. It seemed that they had completely treated the legend of a mysterious object that had once fallen here as a mere story. Day after day passed. Gradually, Wu Ming completely cleaned out the Black Origin Mud in his body. Collis and Enkidu also had the support of Wu Ming's origin power to slowly devour the Black Origin Mud. And when the amount of Black Origin Mud decreased to a certain extent, Wu Ming's powerful, mysterious, and noble aura leaked out. As a result, Wu Ming's aura caused the surroundings to change. Chapter 873. At that time, many communities had already been established in the surrounding area. After hearing about this, they all tried to occupy this place, wanting to dig out the gift from the ground and take it for themselves. However, because of the mutual interference, no community was able to occupy this place. Not long after, perhaps Enkidu and Collis realized this problem. The reduction of the black mud caused Wu Ming's aura to leak out a little. Therefore, the two of them worked together to use the power of the origin in Wu Ming's body to strengthen the seal of the light membrane, causing the leaked aura to disappear. However, even if the aura disappeared, it was too late. The mysterious aura had indeed appeared here before, so it was still debated, and the surrounding communities were still fighting over it. In the past, No Name, who was not far from here, heard about this matter and came over. They took root in this land and put an end to the surrounding communities' greed for the powerful gift under this land. At that time, No Name was the ruler of this area, so they had the right to do so. Of course, there were rumors in the outside world that No Name came to be the peacemaker in order to monopolize the mysterious gift in this land. However, No Name did not have such intentions. Even if they did, they would not be able to find the specific location. After all, the seal had been strengthened by Enkidu and Collis. However, there was no guarantee that there would be a next time when the aura would leak out. No Name, who did not monopolize the mysterious gift, Wu Ming, once again sealed this land. Although it was called a seal, it was actually just a barrier that isolated them from the outside world. The purpose seemed to be to prevent Wu Ming's aura from leaking out again. Days passed like this, and Wu Ming's aura did not leak out again. Some of the surrounding communities also changed dynasties. Simply speaking, this matter had gradually faded away. However, 3 years ago, the Demon King suddenly attacked No Name for unknown reasons. After defeating No Name and taking away almost everything No Name had, the people behind the Demon King dug up Wu Ming along with the ground and took him away. Even if the other party didn't come for Wu Ming, they must have planned to kidnap this mysterious gift of Wu Ming as well. It seemed that the hole that Wu Ming had seen in No Name that had a trace of his own aura was left behind in this way. After that, perhaps for the sake of research, someone accidentally broke the seal. As one could well imagine, the source of the black mud emerged. Although Wu Ming couldn't see the other party's face clearly, he knew that they were definitely from the faction behind Galji. Although they also realized that there was something in the Black Origin Mud, the power of the Black Origin Mud might have exceeded their expectations, and they panicked for a moment. But right after that, Wu Ming, Enkidu, and Collis all entered a black box, which seemed to be a seal-type gift. This didn't mean that the black root soil was harmless just because Enkidu and Collis stopped their plan to eliminate it. The black root soil was still very corrosive when it was with something that was filled with the aura of origin power. In short, Wu Ming was sealed again. However, it seemed that the seal wasn't very effective. The black root soil was constantly corroding the seal, and this was also thanks to Wu Ming's origin power, eliminating a large amount of the black root soil. If it was the original amount of black root soil, let alone 3 years, the seal would have been broken in less than 3 days. And because they seemed to have fallen into the hands of an unknown enemy, Enkidu and Kalas slowed down or even stopped their work of eliminating the black root soil. They wanted to wait for Wuming to come to this world first. After all, if they completely eliminated the black root soil before Wuming arrived, Wuming's unconscious body would definitely be used by this unknown enemy. As for why, Wuming guessed that the other party was the enemy behind Galji, but Enkidu and Kalas didn't know. However, there was one thing that they were certain of, and that was that the people who attacked, No Name, and took away Wuming's body were not good people. At the very least, they were already on opposing sides, not to mention that these people were also trying to study Wuming. And the black root soil became an invisible shield, protecting Wuming's body from being studied by the enemy. And without origin power, these people had no good way to break the black root soil, unless they assimilated with the black root soil. However, Wuming felt that they would definitely not choose to do so. As for why, it was just Wuming's intuition towards these people with bad habits. After that, about 3 years had passed. From time to time, some people would open the seal to examine and study it. It seemed that they were not willing to accept the fact that the black root soil was a hot potato, and felt that they had to study it even if they had to burn the skin of their hands. During this period, people or objects would be thrown in from time to time, as if those people were studying the black root soil. However, whenever a third-rate person came in, Enkidu and Kalas would use their origin power to corrode the black root soil, and the stimulated black root soil would corrode the person who came in. It must be known that if the black root soil was accepted by an outsider, it would fuse with that person like a symbiotic entity. If that happened, it would be difficult to deal with, which was why Enkidu and Kalas did this. As for indirectly causing the death of someone, sorry, but this was the right thing to do. First, it could prevent the enemy from studying Wuming's body, and prevent the enemy from having the opportunity to study it. Second, it could prevent the black root soil from fusing with an outsider as a parasite, because if an evil person were to coexist with the black root soil, then it would cause a disaster in this world. Thinking about it this way, Enkidu and Kalas could be considered to have contributed to the box garden world. In short, they did not study anything for 3 years. It was unknown whether they were not in a hurry or were not interested, but the number of times they opened the sealed box to experiment on Wuming also decreased. Perhaps it was also related to the fact that they did not study anything even once. One day, someone opened the seal on the box and put Wuming's body into multiple layers of gift cards. Without the seal effect of the box, the mere gift cards could not resist the corrosion of the black root soil. In the end, the black root soil destroyed all the gift cards, and the black root soil poured into the outside world. At the same time, the black root soil seemed to have broken some kind of seal on the outside world and released a white three-headed dragon. The last thing Wuming's body saw was the three-headed dragon absorbing the black root soil, including Wuming's body, into its body. The light that Wuming's body turned into was right where the three-headed dragon's heart was. Needless to say, this was definitely Galji's doing. He put the unsealed black root soil into the seal of absolute evil. The black root soil, which was also a bug like Wuming, easily broke Az Dakaha's seal. Wuming already knew the rest, so he didn't need to continue watching. Chapter 874. Kalas, record my memory and make it into a projection. I might need it later. Wuming opened his eyes and said to the dragon horn headpiece on his head. Yes, master. Kalas began to read Wuming's memory. Without a doubt, Kalas, as a pure support-type magic attire, could definitely do this. Reading Wuming's memory was nothing to be surprised about. Wuming, who trusted Kalas very much, wouldn't care about this. As for Kalas, who was extremely loyal to Wuming, her mission was to perfectly carry out Wuming's orders. Then, Wuming looked at the golden chain on his dragon arm. Enkidu, are you there? Master Wuming, I'm here. Enkidu's elf-like voice entered Wu Ming's mind. Enkidu and Kalas were very similar. They were both existences without bodies. The former lost her body, while the latter didn't have a body to begin with. Both of them were also loyal to Wu Ming and were willing to follow Wu Ming for the rest of their lives. Both of them defined themselves as Wu Ming's tools for Wu Ming to use. Enkidu's actions were even more serious than Kalas. Kalas was an existence similar to an artificial intelligence, so it was natural for her to talk to Wu Ming. On the other hand, Enkidu was a heavenly lock, a chain. What was a chain? It was a weapon, and a weapon didn't need to communicate with its master. Therefore, Enkidu and Wu Ming didn't have much interaction. She wouldn't be jealous of Kalas. After all, Enkidu could speak whenever he wanted to. Wu Ming didn't forbid Enkidu from speaking. It was just that Enkidu didn't want to speak because of his definition of a weapon. However, whenever Wu Ming took the initiative to talk to Enkidu, Enkidu would always respond to Wu Ming enthusiastically. Seeing that Enkidu responded to him, Wu Ming didn't rush to talk to Enkidu. Instead, he continued to call out to Kalas. And Kalas. Master? Kalas asked. After the two of them turned their attention to Wu Ming spoke. This kind of situation won't happen again, I promise you. Wu Ming's tone was full of seriousness. Wu Ming was naturally referring to Enkidu and Kalas, who had followed Wu Ming's body into this world for an unknown period of time. Moreover, they had been protecting Wu Ming's body for such a long time. At that time, due to the unbearable pain caused by the explosion of the black soil, Wu Ming's consciousness directly separated from his body. This was something that couldn't be stopped. Although this wasn't Wu Ming's fault, and Enkidu and Kalas didn't blame Wu Ming couldn't stand it. Last time was my mistake. I promise you, there won't be a next time. What Wu Ming meant was that next time, he would definitely eliminate Gidia completely. He definitely wouldn't let Gidia do it again. Of course, we agree with the idea of eradicating Gaia, but, Kalas paused mid-sentence, and Enkidu continued. You don't have to do this, Master. The two of them meant that Wu Ming didn't have to make a special promise to them. No matter what, I will always be your chief priest, Master Wu Ming. There isn't a priest who doesn't want to stay with the god they believe in. You are my master, and I don't think it's a sad thing to stay with you. Wu Ming couldn't help but laugh in his heart. I was being pretentious. Indeed, with the relationship between Wu Ming, Enkidu, and Kalas, there was no need for him to take care of himself. However, Wu Ming always forgot, or perhaps it was because he valued Wu Ming so much that he forgot. Now, let's deal with the problem of Azdakaha. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he looked at his dragon claw. Silent sound hadn't done much damage to Azdakaha. All he had done was bind him with the skylock, burn him with the origin fire, and stab him with the gold sword. That shouldn't have been enough to kill Azdakaha. In the end, Azdakaha died just like that. It was a dramatic scene of, I didn't even do anything and you're already dead. According to what Kalas said, Azdakaha died of spiritual causes. Kalas, what do you mean by spiritual death? Wu Ming asked. Master, the spiritual death that I have concluded is the disappearance of the soul. In other words, your physical body is still alive. That was why Azdakaha looked like he was asleep. Simply put, his soulless body was not completely dead. Wu Ming guessed that Azdakaha's powers had been sealed by the gold sword, which caused his godhead to be low. Afterward, the origin fire burned the black mud in his body and burned his soul away. Although Azdakaha's body was still alive, it was only a matter of time before he died. What was important was the words Azdakaha left behind before he died. As a bug, Wu Ming could indeed ignore the rules and forcefully eliminate the trials that humans had to pass if they wanted to survive. However, at the same time, the world would create new trials for humans to pass. For example, your neighbor's parents arranged for your neighbor's child to mow the grass by hand to train him. Coincidentally, you were weeding with a lawnmower. Afterward, you helped the neighbor's child mow the grass. This would be seen by the parents, but because you had good intentions, they would not say anything. However, for the sake of their child, they would still give the child a new training mission. It was the same in the box court world. Wu-Ming helped humans eliminate the trials that they had to pass, so the world would rearrange the trials for them. Az Dakaha, who had the identity of absolute evil in the final trial, was indeed killed by Wu-Ming. However, the identity of absolute evil was not killed. The world could pull out another evil god from the myths and let him become absolute evil for humans to pass the trials. This problem needs to be solved, Wu-Ming said in a low voice. From the world's point of view, humans, who had become the leader of all things, had to accept the trials to prevent humans from becoming arrogant and destroying the world and themselves. However, from Wu-Ming's point of view, even without the trials, humans would not become like that. Wu-Ming believed in humans and the infinite possibilities of humans. However, the world was not human. It would not reason with you and would only do things according to the rules. Absolute evil. Wu-Ming stared at Az Dakaha's corpse and pondered. It seemed like he was considering a certain possibility. However, at this moment, within the range of Wu-Ming's mental power, two figures flew over from afar. Chapter 875. These two figures were White Yiksha and Vera. Holy White Dragon. White Yiksha slowly reduced her flying speed. The other party's aura gave White Yiksha, who was nervous at the moment, a very dangerous feeling. Right now, she was not the opponent of this dragon that occupied almost the entire magma lake. Not only that, the dragon gave White Yiksha a very unusual feeling. It was as if she was facing the whole world. At the same time, there was a sense of familiarity, as if she had seen it somewhere before. White Yiksha shook her head and stopped thinking about it. The most important thing now was, she had to determine whether this dragon was an enemy or a friend first. Villo is there. Vera said casually again and rushed over again. Wait a minute. Vera. White Yiksha felt a headache coming on. Vera was good at everything, but she was a natural airhead, which was quite helpless. In this helplessness, White Yiksha also sped up and flew over with Vera. White Yiksha, Vera, you're here. Wu-Ming saw the two people coming and greeted them. Thou art a Villo. White Yiksha was shocked. It was not White Yiksha's fault for not recognizing Wu-Ming. After all, although the aura of the follower's spiritual base and the aura of the main body were somewhat similar, Wu-Ming's main body's aura was more unique. It was like the difference between tofu and stinky tofu. In short, this seemingly dangerous dragon in front of them was one of them. Vera has become so big. Vera excitedly flew around Wu-Ming's big head and said, Is it very big? I think it's just right. Although Wu-Ming did not have much awareness, his body had indeed grown a lot in the box court world. After all, he had fallen into the box court world since the creation of the box court. Although it had not reached hundreds of millions of years, it had been thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and so on. In short, it could only be more and not less. And such a long time of settling down in exchange for Wu-Ming's growth. At this moment, he was not much smaller than the 54545 outer sect. If he spread his wings that had been curled up, he would probably completely surpass this outer sect. As for how big an outer sect was, Wu-Ming had no idea. Anyway, the box court world was very big. The diameter of the Earth was about 12,700 kilometers. From the North District to No Name, it would be 980,000 kilometers. Moreover, this was the distance from the North District to No Name. Moreover, Wu-Ming's current body size could be freely controlled. Therefore, the size of his body was not very significant. Chi. Really, my heart has been taken care of during this period of time. It had to be said that White Yiksha, who was used to living a peaceful life, was a bit like an old man. Once he was stimulated, his heart would not be good. Just as Wuming was thinking this, White Yiksha instantly looked at Wuming. She had a nagging feeling that Wuming was thinking of something bad. Vera, on the other hand, saved the day. Villo, are you hurt? Vera, who had flown to Wuming's head, sat down on Wuming's head without holding back. I'm fine. Thanks to Az Dakaha, my body has been found. Also, Az Dakaha is already dead, Wuming said as he lifted Az Dakaha's corpse in his dragon claws. Back then, I thought that thou must be extraordinary. I didn't expect thy true identity to exceed my expectations. White Yiksha also approached Wuming and observed him carefully. At this moment, Az Dakaha was no longer that important. I have a feeling that I've seen thee somewhere before. Looking at Wuming, a sense of familiarity surged in White Yiksha's heart again. However, she just could not recall where she had seen Wuming. When White Yiksha said this, Wuming had some guesses. According to White Yiksha's experience, White Yiksha had probably existed when Wuming had fallen into the box court. White Yiksha at that time should have been called White Night King. Since that was the case, it was not strange that White Night King had sensed Wuming's aura. Perhaps my aura had leaked into this world at some point. After all, my identity is very special. Dragon of Origins. White Yiksha suddenly spoke. Wuming was shocked. He did not say anything, but White Yiksha had guessed it immediately. Although Wuming's expression did not change much and he did not answer White Yiksha's question, it was because of Wuming's appearance that White Yiksha was even more certain that her guess was correct. Ma, don't be so surprised. It's not strange that I know about the Dragon of Origins. I'm one of the top 10 in the box court. White Yiksha smiled rather proudly. White Yiksha's words made Wuming fall into deep thought. It seemed that from the beginning until now, many people knew about the existence of the Dragon of Origins. Back then, Wuming's master, Skaha, had seen through Wuming's essence at a glance. Although that was related to Wuming's incomplete awakening, many people still recognized Wuming's identity later on. Although many knew of Wuming's identity because they had come into contact with the Black Origin soil, there were also those who knew of Wuming's identity without coming into contact with the Black Origin soil. Without exception, they were all high-level existences, such as gods. Back in the burning Winterwood City, although the twin goddesses' combat strength was very weak, they had seen through Wuming's identity just by coming into contact with Wuming. They had surrendered because of that. As a star spirit, White Yiksha had also recognized Wuming's identity. Perhaps that was the reason. White Yiksha seemed to have seen through Wuming's thoughts, so he spoke. It seems that you have something on your mind. After this matter, I have something to say to you. You will definitely like it. It seemed that White Yiksha wanted to discuss the problem of the power of origins with Wuming in detail. Wuming was naturally eager for this. He still hoped to obtain more information about the Dragon of Origins from an insider. After all, Wuming had never seen his own race. Wuming's hometown had been found. Now, it was time to find Wuming's own race. Now, we have to deal with the problem of absolute evil. As White Yiksha spoke, he landed on Wuming's dragon claw and arrived beside Az Dakaha's body that had yet to completely die. If you killed absolute evil, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to deal with, right? White Yiksha turned his head and looked at Wuming's big eyes. From the looks of it, White Yiksha also knew that the power of origins was a bug. According to Az Dakaha's last words, a new absolute evil might be born after Az Dakaha's death, but this absolute evil will no longer be Az Dakaha. Although he said that, Wuming didn't have a headache at all. It's indeed very difficult. White Yiksha fell into deep thought. she was the same as Wu Ming. She also had a headache over the world's actions. Look at how confident you are. Could it be that you have a good idea? With my strength, even if another absolute evil appears, I can still easily destroy it, Wu Ming replied in a deep voice. Indeed, with Wu Ming's nature of ignoring the box court's rules, all he needed to do was use powerful means to attack the new absolute evil. He didn't need to care about the restrictions brought about by absolute evil's identity. But that way, a new absolute evil will definitely be born, right? White Yiksha shook his head and denied it. That's why I'm not prepared to do that. Wu Ming shook his head. I have a better idea. Chapter 876. However, at that moment, Vera, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. Villo, isn't it hot to stay in here all the time? Vera asked in concern as she tilted her head. After hearing Vera's words, Wu Ming also realized this point. It's not hot, but I still have to thank Vera for her concern. As the magma didn't cause much damage to Wu Ming, well, basically no damage, Wu Ming subconsciously ignored this point. To Wu Ming, soaking in the magma was like soaking in a hot spring that wasn't too hot. It wasn't very comfortable, but it was at least warm. Speaking of which, it's indeed inconvenient to talk to you like this. After Wu Ming said that, his body emitted light as his dragon body transformed into a blob of light that instantly shrank. When the light dissipated, Wu Ming in his human form floated in the air with Vera in his arms and appeared in front of White Yiksha. He still had black hair and red eyes. There weren't any major changes. Where's Absolute Evil's corpse? White Yiksha asked. How could such a large human in the final trial be gone in an instant? I've placed AZ Dakaha's corpse in my gift card. It might come in handy later. As Wu Ming spoke, he raised his free hand and waved the gift card in his hand. Ignoring the fact that the three-headed dragon was already dead, his body wasn't completely dead. Even if it was a living creature, it could be stored in the gift card. Wu Ming's body had been stored in the gift card, so Celestia could also enter Wu Ming's gift card. By the way, White Yiksha, did the flames created by the sun's incarnation injure anyone? Wu Ming was very clear about the power of the flame pillar created by the sun's incarnation. It was a powerful flame that affected the entire outer sect of the 54545 sect. If there was anyone around, they would probably be injured if not killed. Thanks to you, no one died. When Wu Ming said this, White Yiksha was furious. After all, the power of that attack was too great. If White Yiksha hadn't been cautious and let the people of the Alliance retreat first, not many of them would have been able to survive. This wasn't a joke, but a fact. Not many people in the Alliance could withstand Wu Ming's Sunday. Although it was called an alliance, it was only a team formed by a dozen or so communities in the outer sect. Furthermore, due to Absolute Evil's sudden attack, it was unrealistic to instantly form a true alliance. If not for Vera's presence and the news of White Yiksha's impending arrival, few people would have been able to resist AZ Dakaha. After all, White Yiksha, White Yiksha, White Yiksha's White Yiksha, and Yiksha's White Yiksha's thought. They were the weaks, they were Yiksha. However, if they ran away, the ordinary residents of Boxting would suffer. The reason why these communities were able to take root in their respective lands was not because of their powerful strength, but also because the nearby residents helped each other. If you can save my life when I'm in danger, it's not in vain for me to take care of you. This could be considered a debt of gratitude. However, people like Shadora didn't care about debt of gratitude. Or rather, she still didn't understand the so-called debt of gratitude. In her opinion, her salamandra was taken care of by the outer sect members of the 54545 Yiksha. Therefore, she would definitely stand in front of everyone to fight against the incoming enemy. Moreover, if a Yiksha escaped, the reputation of the Yiksha would be ruined. The Yiksha world's most important component. If one had to describe it, it was equivalent to a country. However, Yiksha had a lot of countries. The name and flag of a country naturally became the two most important things. And the thing that was linked to these two was reputation. Although Yiksha didn't have a bad reputation after being attacked by the Demon King, they were no longer welcomed by others. After all, Yiksha was so weak that they couldn't even feed themselves, let alone have any value in befriending them. However, No Name did not have a bad reputation. In other words, if No Name became stronger, there would still be people who wanted to befriend him. Similarly, if your reputation was tarnished, then no one would want to befriend you. In fact, no one would want to befriend you in the future. As mentioned earlier, the number of communities in the box court world was more than the number of stars in the sky. There was no need for the other communities to be so close to you, as there were other communities that could replace you. Under the same condition with only one variable, if one community had a much better reputation than the other, any smart person would choose to associate with the community with a good reputation instead of the community with a bad reputation. From this, it could be seen how important reputation was to the community. Therefore, when they learned that Vera and White Yiksha were helping, these people gritted their teeth and took a gamble. If they won, it would increase their reputation. If they lost, then. Anyway, if they didn't gamble, they wouldn't be able to survive in the end. At the very least, these people were here. Since they were here, no matter what their mentality was, they were all family. As for his family, White Yiksha felt that it was fine as long as they didn't die. Since no one died, let's think of a way to restore the outer door of 54545. Wu Ming looked at the surrounding magma. Not only was a large area of the outer door of 54,545 hollowed out, but it was also covered by magma of unknown depth. Even if there were any special gifts, it would take a long time to restore the outer door of 54,545 that had turned into magma to its original state. Thou needn't worry about that. Although it will take a lot of time, it's just the ground and buildings. It's not difficult for me or the people of outer door of 54,545. White Yiksha was right. Although the resources in the North District were scarce, on the contrary, the North District had a large number of gifts that could be used for a long time. Some useful gifts could be used to remove the magma or directly transform it into the ground. The main point was that because of Wu Ming's monstrous fire pillar, many people were dehydrated, burned, and unconscious. Many people are injured. If this drags on, no one knows if their lives will be in danger. At the moment, we don't have time to treat them. This was what troubled White Yiksha. Although the North District had many gifts that could be used for a long time, there weren't many healing-type gifts. Moreover, there were so many people. Fortunately, Az Dakaha was defeated. If these bug-like people were to fight Az Dakaha, they would probably be sending themselves to their deaths. Since it's because of me, let me help. Wu Ming volunteered. Chapter 877. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he fully released his mind power. In an instant, it spread throughout the entire outer 54545, and he easily saw the wounded. There are so many of them. Even Wu Ming was shocked. See? That's right, there are so many of them. White Yiksha sighed. You did give me a shock, but, as Wu Ming spoke, he threw Vera, who had been obediently lying in his arms without speaking, into the sky. Ugh! Although Vera was not frightened, she still let out a whimper. Immediately after, Wu Ming shook his body and light covered his entire body. His body expanded greatly and turned back into a dragon's body, but this time, his body was much smaller than before. And Vera, who was thrown up high by Wu Ming, just happened to be sitting on Wu Ming's neck. Villo. Are you going to help the wounded? Vera, who was sitting on Wu Ming's neck, held Wu Ming's dragon horns tightly with both hands and looked at Wu Ming with her head tilted to the side. Of course, although I did get a shock, this amount is still not a problem. As Wu Ming spoke, he did not care about White Yiksha anymore. He flapped his wings and flew away. Really, since you're so confident, let me see. White Yiksha could only smile helplessly. Then, he slowly followed Wu Ming. With Wu Ming's current speed, it only took a few seconds to fly to the outer 54,545's realm wall. Wu Ming looked at the half-melted realm wall and could not help but sigh. Even the realm wall can't withstand it. Looks like I went a little overboard. However, in this way, Wu Ming had a further understanding of the power of his authority. Staying in the air, Wu Ming looked down at the people below who were panicking because of his arrival. They really did not know that Az Dakaha had been killed. And Wu Ming was emitting an extremely powerful aura, so it was inevitable that they would panic. However, this panic was only temporary. This was because Wu Ming had already started chanting the spirit of words. Along with Wu Ming's words, the pointer on the huge disc in Wu Ming's heart suddenly pointed to the direction of 7 o'clock. The incarnation of vitality was instantly activated. Wu Ming's whole body was exuding a strong breath of life. Then, Wu Ming chanted a new incantation. In the disc in his heart, the second needle of the new needle pointed to the 6 o'clock direction. God says that humans are sinful. God said that humans needed to be purified. With this, you will bestow the torrential flood upon me. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the people of this world equal freedom. For a moment, the flood was also activated. The so-called flood was generally a natural disaster of God. In other words, the flood came from the sky, rain. The reason why it could become a flood on the ground was because the amount of rain was too much. Then, if the amount of rain was reduced, wouldn't it become normal rain? For example, now. The sun was still hanging in the sky, and there were no dark clouds, but the rain came out of nowhere. Drop by drop, it fell on the ground and fell on the people. The area was so large that it even affected the surrounding outer doors. Why is it suddenly raining? There are no clouds either. Is it the enemy's move? Is it the work of the wyvern in the sky? This group of people was noisy, and they began to look for tools to shelter themselves from the rain. Some even took out the gift of shelter. However, not everyone thought that it was an enemy attack. Some people who were guarding their unconscious companions found that their unconscious companions had woken up. Their originally red and hot bodies had calmed down, and their injuries were basically healed. Some people who were directly drenched in the rain found that their small injuries had disappeared directly. There were also people who were not injured. Although they were not injured, they were slightly tired, but after being drenched by the rain, their fatigue disappeared. There's grass growing. A sharp-eyed person suddenly saw a blade of grass rapidly growing out of the ground. The fresh leaves were verdant and full of life. Following that, someone shouted. This rain is full of vitality. It was not known who had a special gift, but he directly used the gift to test the rain and found out that the rain contained a lot of vitality. All kinds of phenomena made the people unable to react, but that person's words were like the last straw that broke the camel's back, making the people explode. The people who were originally sheltering from the rain no longer sheltered from the rain and directly ran into the rain. The people who took out their grace to block the rain silently put it away with their faces flushed red. The unconscious and injured people were also pushed to the open space where there was no shelter and were drenched in the rain. Looking at the people who were constantly moving below, Wu Ming couldn't help but shake his head. They didn't know whether the enemy was destroyed or not, but they were still so excited because of the rain of life. Sure enough, most people were a bunch of crooks. However, there were still people who were still vigilant, such as Shadora. Although Shadora and Salamandra were also receiving the baptism of the Rain of Life, Shadora was still constantly giving orders, such as taking care of the injured and paying attention to the investigation, and so on. Villo's ability. At this time, Vera, who was riding on Wu Ming's neck, also opened her mouth because she was also in the baptism of the Rain of Life. The power obtained from killing a god is not worth mentioning, Wu Ming said rather modestly. The vitality and recovery brought by the incarnation of a vitality fused with the incarnation of flood to help the injured recover in the form of rain. It was a very simple use of the power. However, Vera didn't think that it was really not worth mentioning like Wu Ming said. Not to mention other things, this gift that could restore the vitality of so many people, Wu Ming casually used it, and it didn't seem to be at full strength, nor was it a one-time use. This was already very surprising. Not to mention, Wu Ming's Rain of Life affected several outer sect members. Wu Ming was also very helpless about this. This group of people in the alliance originally surrounded the outer sect of the 54545. If he simply released the Rain of Life in one place, the people in other places wouldn't be able to receive it, so he had no choice but to increase the range of the Rain of Life. Anyway, it didn't take much effort. In Wu Ming's view, it was just an apology for burning the entire outer sect of the 54545. However, Wu Ming forgot that at that time, the Black Mud Cave occupied the entire outer sect of the 54545. Even if he didn't burn the entire outer sect of the 54545, he still had to clean it up afterwards. As expected of you. You've really broadened my horizons once again. Chapter 878. The person who spoke was naturally White Yiksha, who had followed behind. Speaking of which, Villo, you're really omnipotent. White Yiksha crossed her arms as she floated beside Wu Ming. She was also receiving the baptism of the Rain of Life. The last trace of her mental exhaustion had also completely disappeared. This Rain of Life is enough to heal all the injured. I'll take my leave then. I won't be participating in the reconstruction of the outer sect of 54545. After all, there were still many things to deal with. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Hey! Why don't you leave Vera behind? White Yiksha roared in annoyance. Vera can't help much anyway. It's not like she's missing. Wu Ming's voice came from the sky. Immediately after, black-purple ripples appeared. Wu Ming and Vera's figures disappeared. Seriously, my role is really just to clean up this Villo's mess. Although her tone was helpless, White Yiksha wasn't dissatisfied. After knowing that absolute evil had broken through the seal, she had thought of many endings. Now, all she had to do was sacrifice land and towns to kill absolute evil. It couldn't be better. Moreover, other than a small number of people who died because of the chaos at the beginning, there were basically no more casualties. Because of Wu Ming's Rain of Life, everyone's physical injuries and mental exhaustion had recovered. It could be said that everyone was happy. White Yiksha's mood was much better after eliminating absolute evil at such a low price. Even if she had to clean up someone else's mess, White Yiksha was happy. Go and make the final speech. After White Yiksha finished speaking, she flew down. After all, in the absence of Vera, only White Yiksha could make the final declaration of victory. At that moment, in a place far away that was not affected by the Rain of Life, a few people who were obviously Salamandra were carrying a person who had fainted from the ups and downs of the journey. They were still speeding up. Lord Mandela, we're almost at the next outer sect. You have to hold on. However, at that moment, Mandela could no longer speak. Immediately after, Mandela's head tilted and he completely fainted. Lord Mandela. Between 399999 and 40000000 was the place where the fire dragon's birth ceremony was held. As they had confirmed that Absolute Evil's doppelganger had completely disappeared, the restoration work had already begun. Whether it was the ground or the houses, they were all being restored by professionals with their blessings. The undamaged bell tower was the fastest to be repaired. At the highest point of the bell tower, dark purple ripples appeared, and Wu Ming, who had already transformed into his human form, emerged with Vera in his arms. Wu Ming sighed as he gently put Vera down. Previously, Wu Ming still had business to attend to, so he didn't pay much attention to Vera's body. Now that he had relaxed, Wu Ming realized how ridiculous Vera's body was. Where is this? Vera had some impression of this place because Wu Ming had asked Vera to wait for him here. Sorry, I've never been to the Northern District before. I'm only familiar with this place. Sitting on the edge of the bell tower, Wu Ming took a deep breath and exhaled. It had to be said that no one would come here. Moreover, at such a high place, the fresh but not cold air could also clear one's mind. Why did Villo bring me here? Imitating Wu Ming, Vera also sat on the edge of the bell tower, right next to Wu Ming. I wanted to tell you that Maxwell is dead. Wu Ming's words made Vera's body tremble, but it was only a slight tremble. Vera was clearly shocked. What, you don't believe me? Wu Ming put his hands on the edge and turned to look at Vera. Vera shook her head silently. I was just shocked. She wasn't shocked that Wu Ming killed Maxwell. Vera was shocked that she had forgotten the beginning. Vera only now realized that she and Wu Ming only wanted to deal with Maxwell in the beginning. When they met Maxwell in the outer gate of 54,545, Wu Ming signaled for Vera to leave temporarily and deal with Maxwell alone. Then, for some reason, the human final trial sealed under Raging Flame City was released. Raging Flame City and even the entire outer gate of 54,545 fell into the territory. The entire outer gate of 54,545 also turned into AZ Dakaha's Demon Denver. After that, Vera and the surrounding outer gate communities formed a not-so-good alliance. Vera really didn't know what to do next. She did have many methods, but when facing the black mud, she couldn't use them, or they were completely ineffective. She believed that Wu Ming, who was still in the black mud den, would be fine. She had no basis, just pure trust. From the beginning, when Wu Ming was willing to help Vera deal with Maxwell, Vera also began to trust Wu Ming. However, she was still worried. In the end, she could only pray that White Yiksha could come as soon as possible, or that the Sky Army of the upper echelons of the Box Court could come as soon as possible. However, who would have thought that Wu Ming would be able to kill Absolute Evil? Moreover, he had used so many amazing moves. Even White Yiksha's understanding of Wu Ming was renewed. Vera, who didn't know as much about Wu Ming as White Yiksha, also had a renewed understanding of Wu Ming. Therefore, Vera wasn't surprised that Wu Ming, who could kill Absolute Evil, could also kill Maxwell. Don't you want to know how I killed Maxwell? Wu Ming was a little depressed. No. Vera shook her head hard. The existence of foul on her chest also shook a little. The corner of Wu Ming's mouth twitched slightly. He silently turned his head and no longer looked at Vera. Maxwell is dead. You don't have to hide anymore. This was the message Wu Ming wanted to convey to Vera. In Wu Ming's opinion, a large part of the reason why Vera didn't have a fixed place to stay all day was because of Maxwell's pestering. Now, Vera could stay in the community obediently and take on the responsibility of being the leader of the community. However, why did Vera wander around all day? Vera was probably the only one who knew. Wu Ming suddenly thought of something and looked at Vera again. By the way, Vera, Maxwell dropped a gift after his death. Are you interested? It could be said that Vera helped Wu Ming lure Maxwell out. If they were to split the loot, Vera would definitely have a share. At that moment, Vera shook her head frantically. At the same time, Vera's chest trembled. Okay, I got it. Wu Ming, who turned his head again, sighed. Sure enough, even if Maxwell was dead, Vera still didn't want to have anything to do with him. Then, the gift that Maxwell dropped could only be enjoyed by Wu Ming alone. Then, Wu Ming turned his head again to look at Vera. I'll send you home. After all, Vera shouldn't have returned to her community for a long time. It just so happened that she could go back now. Home. Not knowing what to think, Vera smiled and nodded. Chapter 879. Inside the inherent enchantment of the staff of Anzavulgan, the 7th floor, the lava zone. Galgi sat alone on a higher rock with his eyes closed as if he was resting. Although the terrain was higher, the rock was still slightly red due to the temperature of the lava zone. Not only that, but the surrounding temperature also made Galgi quite uncomfortable. Helplessly, he could only silently half-activate the simulated another cosmology to resist the heat of the rock and the surrounding temperature. At this moment, there was a spatial fluctuation around Galgi. A black-purple ripple appeared, and Wu Ming jumped out from it. After sending Vera off, Wu Ming immediately came here. He had something to discuss with Galgi. You don't look too bad. Wu Ming joked with Galgi. Galgi opened his eyes and looked at Wu Ming, his eyes full of shock and fear. He didn't know what he saw and couldn't remember it at all. It was as if he had seen something beyond his level. His brain began to tremble, and his body began to feel uncomfortable as if he was about to explode and die. Galgi subconsciously cancelled the half-activated simulation of another cosmology, bent over, and kept retching. Ugh, if Galgi had the courage to resist Wu Ming before, then he had no thoughts of resisting the current Wu Ming. Would ants try to kill Earth? Ants didn't have such thoughts at all. They didn't even realize what Earth was. At this moment, Galgi was somewhat similar to an ant. However, this ant realized what Earth was, so he couldn't resist at all. Moreover, it was as if understanding what Earth was beyond the scope of understanding for an ant like him. Galgi's body couldn't bear it and was about to explode. Wu Ming silently frowned when he saw Galgi like this. Why is Galgi so rude? He vomits as soon as he sees someone. However, what Wu Ming didn't know was that the reason why Galgi was like this was because the half-activated simulated cosmology allowed Galgi to see the high-level Wu Ming. If Galgi fully activated the simulated cosmology, he would probably explode on the spot with just a glance. Wu Ming was a little unhappy at this moment. He didn't care about Galgi and let him retch alone. Galgi retched for a while and spat out some unknown liquid, which was instantly evaporated by the high temperature of the lava field. Then, Galgi tried to raise his head again and look at Wu Ming. Sure enough, after cancelling the simulation of another cosmology, Galgi's feeling of looking at Wu Ming again was not much different from before. Galgi himself also understood that it was probably the simulation of another cosmology that allowed Galgi to glimpse a corner of Silent Cry's true self. After adjusting his state of mind, Galgi stood up with a respectful attitude. At this moment, Galgi no longer had any thoughts of resisting Wu Ming. Are you okay? Wu Ming looked at the strange Galgi and was puzzled. Why is he so respectful after vomiting? I'm fine, Sir Villo. May I ask what happened to Absolute Evil? Galgi looked at Wu Ming respectfully. Az Dakaha is dead. Wu Ming wasn't used to Galgi's attitude. Wu Ming turned his head and didn't look at Galgi. He really is dead. Galgi wasn't surprised as if he took it for granted. This puzzled Wu Ming. You killed him, didn't you? This piqued Wu Ming's interest. Galgi clearly knew that humans wouldn't be killed by non-human existences in the final trial, and this information was given to Wu Ming by Galgi. So why was he so sure that Wu Ming had killed Az Dakaha? How so? Wu Ming asked. The aura you give me now is very different. There was a hint of seriousness in Galgi's respectful eyes, as if he wanted to get to know Wu Ming all over again. Right now, I don't have any thoughts of resisting you at all. It was mainly because of the half-activated simulated cosmology that Galji saw some existences in Wu Ming that he couldn't understand and couldn't bear. After all, Galji had been considering whether to fully activate the simulated cosmology to kill Wu Ming immediately after Wu Ming appeared. In the end, he had almost died. Galji now understood why Wu Ming dared to leave him alone. It was because Wu Ming had that kind of strength. The corner of Wu Ming that Galji saw could completely reflect Wu Ming's strength. Even if the simulated cosmology was the power of a universe group, it couldn't instantly kill a bug like the root dragon. At most, it could only cause some damage. After all, it must be known that Galji was able to see those things just now because of the simulation of another cosmology. Since he was able to see the truth of silent wonder, it would at least have some effect. But it was probably only a little. Moreover, if Galji really used the simulated cosmology to launch a sneak attack on Wu Ming, today would probably be his death anniversary. I was indeed the one who killed Azidakaha. Wu Ming had no intention of hiding it. Instead, he openly admitted it. But Wu Ming didn't say how he killed Azidakaha. However, Galji didn't need Wu Ming to tell him. What a joke. He almost died just by looking at Azidakaha, so how could it be difficult for Azidakaha to deal with absolute evil? Immediately after, Wu Ming said. By the way, Maxwell is also dead. Galji was taken aback. Before the battle with absolute evil, Wu Ming clearly told Galji that Maxwell was captured by Wu Ming. And now, Galji and Wu Ming had only met for less than a day, and Galji was told by Wu Ming that Maxwell was dead. No matter how one looked at it, it was full of contradictions. But immediately after, Galji calmed down. Logically speaking, Wu Ming wouldn't lie about such a thing. In other words, Maxwell died during this period of time, or Wu Ming immediately executed Maxwell after killing Azidakaha. The correct answer was that Maxwell died during this period of time. The boon game that Wu Ming set up for Maxwell was to defeat the host in a specified location and time. After Galji killed Wu Ming's clone with another cosmology, Wu Ming created another clone and got it to accompany Maxwell while he went to look for Galji. At that time, Maxwell wasn't dead yet, so Wu Ming wasn't lying when he told Galji and the others that Maxwell was captured by me. And now, Maxwell was naturally executed as a death penalty by the boon game. Not to mention that Silent had already left, leaving behind only a doppelganger. Maxwell couldn't even beat a doppelganger. Silent's doppelganger watched as Maxwell gradually went crazy due to the approaching death. In the end, it was punished by the bestowment game, turning into light and disappearing. And the reason why Galji calmed down was naturally because he realized the problem. Based on the indescribable truth that he saw about Wu Ming, how could the current Wu Ming not be able to kill Maxwell? Chapter 880. Moreover, as Vera had previously understood, Wu Ming was an existence that could even kill humans in the final trial. How could he not be able to deal with a mere 4-digit number of demon kings? I understand. Thank you, Sir Villo, for helping me get rid of Maxwell. Galji respectfully thanked Wu Ming. After all, Maxwell was someone sent by the higher-ups to monitor them, and Galji wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. Do you know the secret of Maxwell's immortality? Wu Ming suddenly asked Galji. Galji revealed an expression as if he already knew. Sir Villo, I know the power in Maxwell's body. It's the power of the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. So you do know. Wu Ming said as he waved his hand, and a small ball of light filled with a strange light appeared in Wu Ming's hand. The ball of light emitted a strange light that seemed to be constantly moving. This was the source of Maxwell's power that Galji had mentioned, the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. Wu Ming didn't know much about science. When Wu Ming arrived at the 5th floor of Nazalik and his doppelganger handed the ball of light to Wu Ming Wu-Ming was still confused. The appraisal of the third perpetual motion mechanism was done by Collis. Collis had a large amount of information stored in her database, and with her processing system, as well as Collis' highest-grade magic attire, as well as the influence of her origin power, Collis could easily do this. Moreover, Collis had also made the same judgment on the already dead Maxwell. Maxwell was a hypothetical, humanoid demon, or similar mechanism proposed by the British physicist James Clerk Maxwell that could detect and control the movement of a single molecule. Later generations called it a hypothetical spirit, or demon. Maxwell was a demon born from a paradox that was denied from the beginning, so he naturally didn't have a physical body. As a hypothetical demon born from this paradox, his strength couldn't even withstand a slightly stronger physical attack. But because of the third perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell combined it with his own characteristics of not having a physical body to be able to produce himself infinitely and resurrect instantly after death. However, even with the perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell couldn't resist the rules of the box. Maxwell was successfully killed by Wu-Ming using the gift game, and the perpetual motion mechanism naturally became the dropped item that killed Maxwell. After all, this third perpetual motion mechanism wasn't Maxwell himself. According to Collis, the third perpetual motion mechanism was a byproduct of Maxwell. In that case, could Maxwell, who could freely control Absolute Evil's doppelganger, have something to do with Absolute Evil Azidakaha? However, after having this thought, Wu-Ming immediately stopped thinking. In any case, those two fellows had already been killed. What was the point of pondering over this? After Maxwell died, he dropped this ball of light. Wu-Ming wasn't afraid that Galji would snatch it away, so he openly showed it to Galji. "Congratulations, Sir Villo." Galji smiled as if it was from the bottom of his heart, and this made Wu-Ming feel quite awkward. "But I presume that you don't need this now that you've fully recovered, right?" Galji's words had a hidden meaning. "You've already guessed it." Wu-Ming wasn't surprised. Galji's fully recovered referred to Wu-Ming's recovery of his body. Galji had seen Wu-Ming before, or rather, he had seen Wu-Ming wrapped in black mud. Although he didn't know where he had seen it, Galji was completely certain that he had seen Wu-Ming's body before. Moreover, Galji's mind wasn't the same as 16 Nights. After calming down, he probably realized that Wu-Ming, who killed Absolute Evil, had already retrieved Wu-Ming's body. And if Galji had really seen Wu-Ming's body, he would naturally understand that Wu-Ming didn't need the third perpetual motion mechanism that much. "You want it?" Wu-Ming looked at Galji with a playful expression and tossed the two balls of light in his hands. "To tell you the truth, we've already figured out Maxwell's nature. We originally planned to kill him after this incident." Galji's words implied that the perpetual motion mechanism was something that they had long planned to use, but who knew that it would be intercepted by Wu-Ming halfway. "So, you want to continue the deal with me?" However, Wu-Ming was amused by his own words. "I'm afraid you haven't realized the situation you're in, Your Highness." Although all of Galji's subordinates addressed Galji as Your Highness, it was rather ironic for Wu-Ming to say these two words. "Putting aside the fact that your another cosmology is useless against me, even if you have other trump cards, do you think they will work on me?" It wasn't that Wu-Ming was arrogant, but his body had experienced countless years of accumulation in the box court world. Even though it was still underage, it was only a step away from adulthood. In Wu-Ming's knowledge, an adult origin dragon and an underage origin dragon were two different species. If an underage origin dragon was considered a living creature, an adult origin dragon was no longer a living creature. As for what it was, Wu-Ming would only know after he became an adult. All in all, even though Wu-Ming wasn't an adult origin dragon, Wu-Ming, who was only a step away from adulthood, was no longer the same as before. Wu-Ming was so powerful that even Wu-Ming, who had returned to his body, was taken aback. If Wu-Ming's strength were to be classified according to the box court world strength, Wu-Ming's strength would definitely be in the double digits. As for why it wasn't in the single digits, it was because, firstly, Wu Ming wasn't sure about the strength of the single digits. Secondly, Wu Ming's strength might have exceeded the single digits and reached an unmeasurable level. If it were an adult Wu Ming, there wouldn't be a need to worry because an adult origin dragon would definitely exceed the single digits. But it was also important to clarify that Wu Ming's hypostasis had only become in existence in the double digits. In other words, he had completely embodied the hypostasis that an origin dragon should have, unlike before, when any random person dared to provoke Wu Ming. Of course, Wu Ming had always subconsciously concealed his hypostasis, but Wu Ming didn't realize it. After all, whether it was the world that Wu Ming lived in or everyone in this world, their hypostasis was lower than Wu Ming's. If Wu Ming completely released his aura, anyone who sensed the aura of a higher hypostasis would die instantly. At that moment, Galji became extremely respectful. It was precisely because he had glimpsed Wu Ming's hypostasis when he activated the simulation of the another cosmology that he survived. But it was also because of this that Galji was completely convinced by Wu Ming. At the very least, Galji would never go against Wu Ming again in the future. He didn't even have any thoughts about it anymore. This came from the bottom of his heart like a different kind of curse. Therefore, Galji wouldn't make any more deals with Wu Ming. Chapter 881. You're wrong, Lord Villo. What I meant was that you can use this on your subordinates. Galji smiled and shook his head. If it was the old Galji, he might have tried to make a deal with Wu Ming. However, after being affected by Wu Ming's hypostasis, he had no intention of taking advantage of Wu Ming or even making a deal with him. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have to ensure your subordinates' loyalty. However, Wu Ming looked at Galji strangely. What's wrong with this guy? Master, I'm afraid he saw your hypostasis and was affected by you. Collis directly spoke to Wu Ming in Wu Ming's mind. Did he pry into my status? Wu Ming immediately thought of Pest. He didn't know what Pest had seen when he was summoned, but his attitude toward Wu Ming had completely changed. Unlike Galji's respect, Pest's attitude toward Wu Ming was one of extreme fear. Pest could see Wu Ming's true self because he had established a master-slave relationship with Wu Ming. However, how could Galji see his true self? My aura is indeed suppressed, isn't it, Collis? Wu Ming asked Collis. Since Wu Ming had just returned to his body, he might not have gotten used to it yet. Thus, Wu Ming had Collis monitor his condition. Master, your aura has been subconsciously suppressed by you. It doesn't seem to have been released. Collis had indeed been monitoring Wu Ming's condition, but Wu Ming had been subconsciously suppressing his aura all this time. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have leaked out. Could it be that the another cosmology simulation allowed Galji to see my hypostasis? Wu Ming thought about it. Perhaps only the another cosmology simulation could allow Galji to see his true self. Moreover, his current hypostasis wasn't something someone like Galji could withstand. The difference between the old Wu Ming and the current Wu Ming was like a balloon filled with slow air and a balloon filled with water. As long as the balloon didn't burst, the latter's fall from a high altitude was more lethal than the former's. If Galji had looked at him for a while longer, he might have really died. But now, Galji seems to be very respectful toward me. Wu Ming had an idea. Galji. What is it, Lord Villo? Galji looked at Wu Ming. Tell me everything about the person behind you. That's right, Wu Ming was trying to use Galji's current state to get information about the person behind Galji. But Galji shook his head. Lord Villo, I'm afraid that won't do. It seemed that even if Galji was very respectful, he wasn't at the point where he would listen to Wu Ming's every word. Master, he clearly respects you because of your strength. Everyone knows that respecting the strong is common knowledge in any world. Collis complained in Wu Ming's mind. I know. I just want to try. Wu Ming replied to Collis in his mind with some regret. However, Wu Ming had other ways to get Galji to reveal information. Let's make a deal, Galgi. You tell me everything about the person behind you, and I'll deal with them. Wu Ming's words made Galji's eyes light up. After all, when Galji first learned of Wu Ming's existence, he wanted to make a deal with Wu Ming. He would provide the information, Wu Ming would help him deal with the enemy, and he would gain his freedom. Although they had fallen out before, Galji, who was now affected by Wu Ming's status, was naturally shaken when he heard this deal. 21053880 Outer Gate, No Name's Base Camp. At this moment, in No Name, Black Rabbit, Letitia, 16 Knights in Reverse, Joyu Asuka, and Kasuga Hikari stood at the entrance of No Name, ready to go. Ren, Lily, and Pest stood at the entrance and watched the 5 of them leave. Black Rabbit, Letitia, when you reach the North District, you must take care of 16 Knights and the others. Ren reminded Black Rabbit worriedly. I'll try my best, young Master Ren. Black Rabbit looked at the 3 problem children who were full of fighting spirit and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead helplessly. Although Letitia was also helpless, she still comforted Ren. Don't worry, Ren. Master is still in the North District. When the time comes, there's no need to worry about not being able to control these 3. What a joke. When we reach the North District, I must teach that bastard Villo a lesson. There's a demon king and he didn't call me. 16 Knights in Reverse was very excited. He looked like a wild horse that was about to explode. Same. Seconded. Joyu Asuka and Kasuga Hikari agreed in unison with 16 Knights in Reverse. The 2 of them were also people who wanted to see the world in chaos. Don't joke around, stupid adults. According to Lord White Yiksha, the Demon King this time is the absolute Demon King of one of the humans' final trials. That's one of the strongest in Hakata. If you continue to underestimate the enemy like this, Black Rabbit won't bring you along. Black Rabbit reprimanded from the side. These 3 problem children were too noisy. The enemy this time was clearly not easy to deal with. That's right, when White Yiksha went to the North District, he sent a letter to No Name. The content was that the seal of absolute evil had been broken. However, White Yiksha had been in the North District for a long time, and No Name had just reorganized their people and prepared to support the North District. It was completely because they could not make a decision. The main reason was that 16 Knights and the other 2 were too suitable for their identity as problem children. They clamored about fighting the Demon King. That was absolute evil, a Demon King with a 3-digit number. Even people with a 2-digit number did not dare to underestimate it. It was fundamentally different from the Demon King that 16 Knights and the other 2 had dealt with during their time in Hakata. If they let the problem children go, who knew what kind of trouble they would cause? They might even lose their lives. In the end, Black Rabbit and 16 Knights and the other 2 came to a compromise before they were ready to go. However, No Name was actually not too late. White Yiksha wrote a letter to tell No Name that it was only because Wu Ming was fighting against absolute evil in the North District. Most of the communities in the East District, more than 99% of them, did not even know that absolute evil had broken the seal in one of the humans' final trials. After all, when Glowing Flame Capital was attacked, many people did not know that absolute evil had broken the seal. Therefore, No Name was not too late. Seeing the 3 problem children obediently shut their mouths, Black Rabbit sighed again. Problem children were just too difficult to deal with. Right on the heels of that, Black Rabbit patted his face to encourage himself. Black Rabbit revealed a smile and raised an arm high. Then, everyone, let's go. It had to be said that Black Rabbit looked like he was going on a vacation. It looked like he had underestimated the enemy even more. The 3 problem children complained in their hearts. Right on the heels of that, the 3 problem children looked at each other and smiled tacitly. When they reached the North District, Black Rabbit would be completely useless. However, at this moment, a familiar voice entered everyone's ears. Where are you going? Chapter 882. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound and saw Wu Ming standing there, his face full of confusion. Wu Ming had just returned to No Name when he saw the other members of No Name about to go on a long journey. How could he not be confused? Villo, Mr. The members of No Name screamed as if they had seen a ghost. What's wrong? Everyone shouted in unison, causing Wu Ming to be stunned for a moment. What the hell happened? Mr. Villo, weren't you fighting against Absolute Devil King in the North District? Black Rabbit's ears twitched, looking confused. I killed the Devil King, and then I came back. Wu Ming's tone was very calm, as if he was saying, I came back after eating. But everyone had different reactions when they heard this. Ren and Black Rabbit were shocked, Restia was proud of Wu Ming, the three problem children were unhappy, and Pest was indifferent. After that, Wu Ming shrugged his shoulders and no longer cared about his companions, who he didn't know what they were doing. He walked straight into the interior of No Name. I'll go back first. Wait. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, that was Absolute Devil, how could you kill him so casually? Black Rabbit turned around and wanted to chase after Wu Ming, but because he was too excited, his footsteps were a little shaky. I didn't kill Absolute Devil casually, I fought with him for a day and a night before I killed him. Wu Ming replied without turning his head. Although he said that, it still didn't seem like it was difficult for him to kill Absolute Devil King. Furthermore, Reverse 16 Knights was very unhappy. Not bad, Mr. Villo, you actually took the big prize without anyone noticing. Reverse 16 Knights said as he suddenly jumped up and kicked at Wu Ming. Clatter, a golden chain suddenly emerged from Silent Cry's clothes like a cold spear. The sharp end of the chain was aimed at 16 Knights, who was trying to turn back. Realizing that the chain was not ordinary, 16 Knights did not choose to fight it head-on. Instead, he changed his movement in mid-air and kicked the chain directly. Bang! The deafening sound of steel colliding rang out, and the airwaves produced by the collision spread out, impacting everyone. This caused Black Rabbit and the others to subconsciously raise their hands to resist the airwaves. At the same time, Wu Ming's aura changed and a tyrannical aura enveloped everyone present. However, the aura disappeared in an instant and everyone felt as though they were hallucinating. In the next second, the originally rigid chain became like an extremely resilient steel whip, ruthlessly lashing towards 16 Knights who had yet to land on the ground. 16 Knights reacted instantly and kicked the golden chain. With the help of the reaction force of the golden chain, he jumped back into the air and did a 360-degree spin before landing steadily. Everyone looked at Wu Ming and 16 Knights in a daze. They could not tell whether the terrifying aura just now was an illusion or real. However, because the terrifying aura appeared for less than a tenth of a second, no one could tell whether it was real or an illusion. You've become stronger, Villo. Reverse 16 Knight's face was filled with an excited smile. He was excited that Wu Ming, a strong opponent, had become stronger. Just as you saw, I accidentally found my body, so my strength is naturally different from before. After comforting Enkidu, Wu Ming put the chain back into his sleeve and turned to look at everyone. So, Mr. Villo found his body. That's great, congratulations. Black Rabbit subconsciously felt happy that Wu Ming found his body. However, Black Rabbit immediately reacted. Wait, that's not the point. Don't fight in front of our community. Black Rabbit rushed towards Reverse 16 Knights in a frenzy, trying to subdue this problematic child who started the fight. Stop, Black Rabbit, I won't fight anymore. However, Reverse 16 Knights stopped Black Rabbit with words. Villo has become beyond my imagination. I can't beat him now. Reverse 16 Knights shook his head silently. Ha! Black Rabbit, who came to Reverse 16 Knight's side, made a strange sound. Reverse 16 Knights, this problematic child, actually admitted that he was not a match for Garen and stopped the fight. Did the sun rise from the west? The truth was not as exaggerated as Black Rabbit thought. It was just that Reverse 16 Knights was more aware of Wooming's strength than the others. When Enkidu helped Wooming block Reverse 16 Knight's attack, Wooming subconsciously wanted to fight back. However, he did not control it well and almost used his full strength. After all, Wooming and Az Dakaha were fighting too intensely. During that one day and one night of fighting, although Wooming did not really use his full strength, every move he made was not casual either. It might not be strong for Az Dakaha, but for the people in the middle and lower levels of the community, it was a very strong move. In short, Wooming was used to fighting seriously. When faced with Reverse 16 Knight's greeting kick, he almost became serious. However, even so, Reverse 16 Knights was still aware of the difference between the two of them. He was no match for Wooming now. Reverse 16 Knights was not someone who did not know when to back down. He still had some self-awareness. Moreover, this was just Reverse 16 Knight's greeting to Wooming. He did not have any intention of fighting Wooming properly. Even if he did, he would not fight in front of so many people in no name. Therefore, it was impossible for them to fight. Black Rabbit was worrying too much. When I become stronger, let's fight again. Reverse 16 Knights revealed an unruly expression and looked at Wooming with joy and anticipation. No, it's too troublesome. After Wooming finished speaking, he turned around and walked into No Name again. Reverse 16 Knights did not mind and followed Wooming into No Name. After all, if they really wanted to fight, it was not something that could be rejected just because one of them was unwilling. Wait. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, you have to explain the matter of the Absolute Demon King, Black Rabbit said and immediately chased after Wooming. Let's go everyone, it's time to go back. Letitia said and walked back into No Name. In the end, our anticipation was in vain. Not good. Jiu Yuao and Hiroi Hiroyuki looked at each other helplessly and followed Letitia for a while. Ren looked around. Other than himself, only Pest was left. However, before Ren could say anything, Pest snorted coldly and silently walked into No Name. Ren smiled awkwardly and walked into No Name unhurriedly. As the leader of the community, Ren successfully became the last member to enter his community. Chapter 883. In the No Name chat room, everyone sat together and chatted with Wooming. They learned about absolute evil bit by bit from Wooming. So that's how it is. Mr. Villo has experienced quite a lot of things along the way. Black Rabbit pointed at several things that Wooming said. Fighting with the Undying Demon King, fighting with the heroes born in the apocalypse, and finally fighting with the humans in the final trial. I'm jealous. 16 Knights wished he could replace himself with Wooming to experience all that. 16 Knights was excited just by thinking about it. Who knew how happy Wooming, who had experienced all that, would be. But that's only for Villo. If it were us, our lives would be in danger. Zhou Yuan Fei now held her teacup and took a sip gracefully. Letitia said, agreeing with Zhou Yuan Fei Niao's words. Yes, Fei Niao is right. Other than Maxwell, whether it's Galgi with his another cosmology or absolute evil in the final trial, they are all very strong enemies for you. Even I would have a hard time winning against them. 16 Knights, on the other hand, didn't care. How would I know if I don't try? I have to see it with my own eyes before I comment. The more dangerous the enemy, the more he liked it. After all, they were problem children. I just didn't expect that Galgi would have another cosmology. It's really surprising. Ren was quite concerned about Galgi, who looked to be the same age as him. By the way, what's this another cosmology? Jiu Yuan Fei Niao raised a question. Oh right, Miss Fei Niao, you guys have just arrived at the box court. I'm afraid you guys don't know about another cosmology. It seemed like Black Rabbit wanted to explain. To put it simply, it contains the powerful gift of cosmology. It can be infinitely magnified to interfere with the powerful forces of the outside world. Every another cosmology is unique, which means that every another cosmology has different abilities. Jiu Yuan Fei Niao nodded thoughtfully. Simply put, it's an extremely powerful gift. You can think of it that way, Miss Flying Bird. However, another cosmology is much more precious and powerful than ordinary gifts. After all, Black Rabbit did not simulate the another cosmology and could not explain it in detail. It could only give Long Flying Bird a general understanding. Wu Ming interjected. It is said that the existence with the simulated cosmic atlas has the potential to become the center of a group of gods. Because of the power of the simulated cosmic atlas, I am afraid that only those with the simulated cosmic atlas can compete with it. Wu Ming recalled how Galji had killed Wu Ming's doppelganger by forcibly activating the simulated another cosmology. It could be said that if it was not Wu Ming's doppelganger that was killed, but the spiritual base body, that blow would have also killed Wu Ming's spiritual base body. Therefore, in Silent's opinion, to fight against that kind of power, unless they also have the simulated cosmology, they can only fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Otherwise, only Silent, the bug, can fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Interesting, a simulation of an alien cosmology. 16 Knights Reversal smiled, but no one knew what he was thinking. However, Black Rabbit was frightened by 16 Knights Reversal's smile. 16 Knights, San, don't think too much. Black Rabbit has a feeling that you will do something. Black Rabbit said as he looked at Jiu Yuan Fei Niao and Haruai Biao. Really, these problem children were too good at causing trouble. Black Rabbit had to be prepared for a rainy day. Then, Black Rabbit noticed that Haruai Biao seemed to be thinking about something. Miss Biao, what's troubling you? Although they were problem children, they were all companions. Black Rabbit was happy to help his companions solve their problems. I'm a bit concerned about the griffin Villo mentioned. Haruai Biao hugged Sanmao Cat and said the reason for his deep thoughts. Is it the genome tree on the griffin? Wu Ming guessed the reason for Haruai Biao's concern. This was something that Wu Ming mentioned before. Yes. Haruai Biao nodded. The genome tree was a gift from my father, and according to what Villo said, the genome tree on the griffin seems to be almost complete. In this way, Haruai Biao had to guess whether the griffin was related to his father. That's easy. Just ask the griffin. Wu Ming said casually. Everyone was shocked. But, Villo-san, can you find the griffin? Black Rabbit was puzzled. Of course I can. Galji's group is still trapped in my inherent barrier. Wu Ming explained and then looked at everyone innocently. Didn't I say that? You didn't say that. Everyone shouted at Wu Ming in unison. Villo, I really didn't know that you're actually a natural airhead. 16 Knights crossed her arms and looked at Wu Ming jokingly. Ahem, in short, Galji's group is locked up by me. I didn't have time to hand them over to White Yiksha. If you want to talk to the griffin, I can do it at any time. Everyone looked at Haruai Biao. Finally, Haruai Biao looked at Sanmao Cat in his arms and nodded. Nasolic's inherent barrier, 6th layer, forest. When Galji's group was locked up in Nasolic's inherent barrier by Wu Ming in the form of a gift competition, they were all separated. Galji was in the lava area of the 7th layer, Aurora was in the underground lake of the 4th layer, and the unconscious Ling was directly thrown into the wilderness of the 8th layer by Wu Ming. The seriously injured Glea was taken care of by Wu Ming and placed in the forest area of the 6th layer. And it turned out that the griffin could indeed settle down in the forest. Glea, who had woken up from his coma, was lying quietly on the ground at this moment to avoid physical exhaustion. Although it was very weak, Glea's injuries were indeed recovering. In short, it was better than nothing. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Glea muttered to himself. Glea, who had woken up from his serious injuries, saw the contract document in front of him at a glance and knew that he was trapped in a place that was not a forest. I'm afraid it's some kind of personal space. Grove thought. After all, there were many people who had such a space in the box court world. Basically, it was used to hold gift competitions. At this moment, he was obviously trapped in the gift competition, so Grove guessed that this was Wu Ming's personal space. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Grove didn't know if His Highness and the others had escaped, or if they were captured like him. But right now, it was more important to recover from his injuries, so Glea simply lay down here peacefully. However, at this moment, there was a fluctuation in space, and two extremely obvious figures appeared not far away from Glea. Glea couldn't help but be vigilant. Chapter 884. Villo. Glea, whose eyesight was much better than humans, saw the two people walking towards them at a glance. The one in front was Wu Ming. Supporting his body that had not fully recovered but was almost able to fight, Glea stood up, and a fighting spirit emanated from him. Although Glea's wings had not recovered yet, he had enough time to rest, which allowed Glea to have the power to fight. What, Glea, do you still want to fight me? Wu Ming, who was walking in front, did not release his aura to intimidate Glea. Instead, he snapped his fingers lightly. In an instant, the ground where Glea was standing cracked slightly, and chains rushed out one after another, throwing all of them onto Glea's body and tightly entangling him. Glea, who did not react in time, instantly fell to the ground because his limbs were all tied up. Damn it! Glea raised his head and looked at Wu Ming rather unbearably. Galji and the others are fine, I just locked them up. You should be honest, I don't want to do anything to you, but I will still hand you over to White Yiksha after this. Wu Ming walked in front of Glea and patted his griffin's head. Up to you. Glea could not beat Wu Ming anyway, and he was now a prisoner, so what could he do? I came to see you this time because I have a companion who is quite interested in you. You can talk to her. Wu Ming said, and Haruai Hibaku walked past Wu Ming from behind and came to the front. Hello, Mr. Glea Grove. The quiet girl holding the three-furred cat took the lead to greet him. Hello, little girl. Grove responded to Wu Ming. Let's not talk about Wu Ming first, at least the little girl in front of him looked pretty good. I'll leave first, Grove. If you're done talking, knock on the chain, and I'll come and pick you up. Wu Ming had no intention of listening in, so he left after instructing Haruai Hibaku. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded, then looked at Grove again. My name is Haruai Hibu. Do you know this? Haruai Hibu said as he took out the pendant hidden in his clothes. This. Could this be? After leaving the 6th floor, Wu Ming arrived at the 7th floor, which was Galji's floor. Sir Villo, what do you think? Galji, who was sitting on a rock that was colder than other places, immediately stood up when he saw Wu Ming. Wu Ming helped Galji find a rock that was not so hot. Galji did not need to keep the another cosmology on to prevent the heat. After all, if he accidentally glanced at Wu Ming when the another cosmology was half turned on, it would definitely be uncomfortable. I haven't done anything to those people yet. It'll take some time, but I'll deal with them in a way that won't put the blame on you or me. After Galji told Wu Ming everything he knew about the people behind him, Wu Ming did not immediately make a move on those existences. First of all, Galji had never really come into contact with the higher-ups. The people he came into contact with were people who were not at the highest level. At most, they were at a higher level than Galji. Even so, Wu Ming was very sure that some of the gods in the upper levels of the box court were behind this. However, because he did not know which gods were behind this, Wu Ming could only make a move on the people Galji knew. After finding these people, Wu Ming would slowly dig out the people behind these people. However, these people's whereabouts were always unpredictable. Wu Ming could not find them at the moment, but Wu Ming had a way. After returning to the root, Wu Ming could use the root's authority to find people in the box court. By then, they would not be able to escape. Oh. What is it? Galji was quite interested in the method Wu Ming had prepared. Not only could he deal with those people, but he could also do it without exposing his identity. However, Wu Ming had no reason to tell Galji that it would be the same even if Galji's attitude toward him became slightly more respectful. You don't need to know that. Then, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. A golden chain extended from Wu Ming's sleeve and bound Galji. It was the celestial lock. The celestial lock was infinitely long. It could still be used after binding Galji. Although Galji did not recognize the chain's true identity, he knew it was a divine spark weapon. Lord Villo. Galji did not resist, but he was a little puzzled by Wu Ming's actions. He was trapped in Wu Ming's game of gifts and could not break free. There was no need to use a divine spark weapon to tie him up. I'm going to hand you over to White Yiksha, so I need to do this. As Wu Ming spoke, he reached out and pierced Galji's body. He did not want to kill Galji. When Wu Ming stabbed Galji, a ripple appeared in front of him. Wu Ming only reached his hand in. Wu Ming found what he wanted without much searching. Then, Wu Ming fished out a slightly curled piece of parchment appeared in Wu Ming's hand. It was the contract scroll that Wu Ming used to force Galji into a gift match. Game name of gift, accumulated time contestants, Galji, Aurora, ringtone, Glea Grove contestant victory condition 1, stay in the designated venue, unlimited, contestant victory condition 2, defeat the organizer contestant defeat condition, leave the designated venue contestant defeat punishment, repeat the game organizer victory condition, defeat the contestant organizer defeat condition, the contestant wins oath, respect the above content, based on the glory, flag, and organizers. Authority, host the gift game. Originate God, seal. That's right, it was such an unsolvable contract document. Not to mention the victory condition, the failure condition was obviously problematic. This obviously did not allow Galji to leave here, even if he had a way to leave, because the failure penalty was to repeat the game. In other words, if Galji and the others used their own way to leave the designated venue, which was Wu Ming's inherent enchantment, then they would fail, and the failure penalty would make them return here again. The only way was to defeat the organizer. However, after Wu Ming locked them here, he did not care about them anymore. Wu Ming only met Galji twice, and Wu Ming did not even see the others, let alone defeat them. And this was not against the rules. After all, there was no rule that the organizer could not leave the designated venue, so this unsolvable gift game essentially became a gift game that restricted the movements of Galji and the others. And now, Wu Ming wanted to destroy this gift game. Kaka. Wu Ming condensed a power that Galji did not recognize in his hand, and the soft parchment made the sound of a hard object shattering. Wu Ming was using the source power to destroy the gift game. As long as the gift game was destroyed, Galji and the others could be freed from the shackles of the gift game. As for why he did not pause it, after all, deleting and pausing were two different things. After Wu Ming handed Galji over to White Yiksha, he did not want to care about them anymore, so Wu Ming chose to destroy this gift game directly. Crack! With Wu Ming's continuous force, the entire parchment shattered. Chapter 885. Snap! Wu Ming snapped his fingers and two figures instantly appeared beside Galji. It was Aurora and Belle. Your Highness. Although Ling was unconscious when he caught her, It had been a long time since then and she had already woken up. You paused our game of grace. Aurora stood vaguely in front of Galgi and looked at Wu Ming with vigilance. Sir Villo didn't pause the game. He directly destroyed the forced game of grace, Galgi answered on behalf of Wu Ming. Although Aurora and Belle were shocked that Wu Ming could destroy the game of grace, they were more shocked by Galgi's attitude toward Wu Ming. Your Highness. Aurora and Belle were puzzled by Galgi's attitude. Why was he so respectful? Belle, Aurora, you must correct your attitude as a prisoner. Galgi looked at the two of them and gestured for them to not act rashly. I made a deal with your Highness. I will help him deal with the enemy, and he will willingly be handed over to White Yiksha to be imprisoned. Waving the heaven lock in his hand, Wu Ming explained to the two of them. Although Aurora and Belle were a little surprised, it was not impossible to accept after thinking about it carefully. After all, if it was a deal of this level, His Highness would still be able to accept it. However, Wu Ming and Galgi's deal wasn't like this. However, Wu Ming wouldn't let Galgi off and Galgi was aware of this, so he didn't expose Wu Ming's words. Besides, Galgi didn't know if it was due to Wu Ming's influence, but he thought through a lot while meditating on the 7th floor. How could dragging out an ignoble existence compare to living honorably? Galgi indeed had to pay the price for his previous actions. If not, wouldn't those who died indirectly because of him be wronged? He was a hero who appeared in the post-apocalyptic world, so he had to do something worthy of the name Galgi. And most importantly, Wu Ming would help him deal with the enemy. Therefore, even though he was about to be imprisoned, Galgi felt that he had gained freedom. Freedom from being dominated by others. Sir Villo is right. We're about to go to jail. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Galgi looked at the two of them apologetically. What are you talking about, Your Highness? Since you want to go to jail, we will definitely accompany you. Grabbing the trapped Galgi, Ring shook her head. Aurora had the same idea. There was no need for apologies between them. The reason they had gathered together was because of Galgi. Since Galgi was going to jail, they would accompany him. Wu Ming was very clear about this, so he only bound Galgi. After all, as long as Galgi was still there, the others wouldn't leave him. It was precisely because he knew this that Galgi said, "Sorry for implicating you," instead of, "You can leave." Of course, even if they wanted to leave, Wu Ming might not allow it. No, Wu Ming definitely wouldn't allow them to leave. Although Galgi was the mastermind, Aurora and Ring's sins weren't small either, so they had to be punished. So, where's Glea? Aurora looked at Wu Ming again. She and Ring had been summoned to Galgi's side by Wu Ming using teleportation, but why wasn't Glea there? One had to know that Glea was seriously injured in order to block Wu Ming's weapon salvo. Could it be? Aurora and Ring suddenly felt sad. Both of them were guessing if Glea had died from his serious injuries. However, only Galgi looked indifferent because he knew very well that Glea must be fine. Wu Ming wouldn't attack Glea, and without external influence, a griffin's vitality was very tenacious. It wouldn't die so easily. Don't worry. It's just because a companion in my community is looking for Glea for something. It's just that the discussion hasn't ended yet. Just wait a little. This made Aurora and Ring feel helpless. In this day and age, they still had to wait when they were sent to prison, but at this moment, the celestial lock binding Galgi made a clanging sound. According to Wu Ming's request, as long as Haruhibu Yao and Glea finished their discussion, they could knock on the heaven lock that bound Glea and send a message to Wu Ming, asking him to pick her up. Although the interval was very short, there was no doubt that Haruhibu Yao had finished talking to Glea. My companion has finished talking to Glea. Wu Ming snapped his fingers again. In an instant, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, and everyone came to a forest. Your Highness. Glea's surprised voice entered everyone's ears. Glea and Galgi were also bound by golden chains, and there was a girl beside them. The girl was Haruhibuyao. Elder Glea, are your injuries okay? Ring immediately ran to Glea's side, looking rather worried. Then, Aurora and Galgi followed. After all, Glea was indeed seriously injured at that time. Except for the wings that have not recovered yet, the injuries on my body have mostly recovered. Glea was right. At that time, he had his back facing Wu Ming's attack. Therefore, as a griffin, his wings had suffered the most serious injuries. It's good that you're fine. At this moment, Galgi was also relieved. While Galgi and the others were talking, Wu Ming also talked to Haruhibuyao at this moment. How is it? Did you get anything you want to know? Haruhibuyao thought for a moment and nodded, but then shook his head. This made Wu Ming a little dumbfounded. Are you not satisfied with the answer? Wu Ming guessed. Yes. This time, Haruhibuyao nodded honestly. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to talk to Glea. Haruhibuyao showed a satisfied smile. It seemed that he had made friends with Glea. Wu Ming, on the other hand, felt that Haruhi Hiroyuki was quite content. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to find clues when looking for something they want. Although Wu Ming didn't know what Haruhibuyao was looking for, Haruhibuyao should be satisfied to be able to find a clue. Do you need my help? Whatever Haruhibuyao was looking for, Wu Ming would find it in an instant when he returned to the route. However, Haruhibuyao refused. I can do it myself. Then, Haruhibuyao's face showed a trace of unwillingness to admit defeat. As expected of a problem child. At this moment, Wu Ming could only smile helplessly. But it was also true that if it was something important to Haruhibuyao, then it was better to let Haruhibuyao do it alone. Then, Wu Ming looked at Galgi and the others who were still chatting. It's almost time to go. It was time to go to jail. Chapter 886. North District, 54545 Outer Sect Ruins. At this moment, the magma lake had been artificially cooled. White Yiksha methodically issued one order after another, allowing the Alliance's community to begin the restoration of 54,545 Outer Sect. Because the time between Absolute Evil's appearance and its destruction was too short, there were no high-ranking powerhouses near 54545 Outer Sect. Even Vera had been abducted by Wu Ming, leaving White Yiksha alone. Therefore, the restoration of the North District's 5-digit Outer Sect 54545 Outer Sect fell to her. Seriously, I'm not the ruler of the North District. Why should I be the commander? White Yiksha kept complaining. In fact, the main reason was that no one came to help, which caused White Yiksha's dissatisfaction. After the rulers of the North District received the news that Absolute Evil had been destroyed, they did not even think of going to 54545 Outer Sect. When there was a powerful external enemy like Absolute Evil, perhaps they would unite, but once Absolute Evil was eliminated, they would fall back into a state of internal strife. Anyway, it was not their outer sect, so there was no need to care. Moreover, White Yiksha could not care about them if they did not come. After all, Absolute Evil had been destroyed, so it did not matter if they came or not. But she was definitely dissatisfied. Villo, that brat, really abducted Vera. Although Vera did not play much of a role in command, she was at least someone from the North District. Now that the North District's outer sect was being rebuilt, how could a ruler of the East District be in command? However, at this moment, White Yiksha happened to sense Wu Ming's presence. Why is that brat Villo here? Although White Yiksha complained and hoped that someone could replace her to command the reconstruction of 54,545 Outer Sect, she really did not expect Wu Ming to come back. Are you looking for me to talk about the Dragon of Origin? Or is there something else? White Yiksha guessed in her heart. Yo White Yiksha. Wu Ming greeted White Yiksha as he walked into the small command post that was temporarily set up. Where's Vera? Where have you abducted Vera? White Yiksha asked in annoyance. I sent Vera back to her community. Anyway, Vera can't do anything here, can she? As if it was his own home, Wu Ming sat down without hesitation, but because there were no chairs, Wu Ming could only find something to sit on. Then why did thou come back? What's the matter? White Yiksha didn't mind Wu Ming's behavior. He was used to it. I'm here to hand Galji and the others over to you. As Wu Ming spoke, he extended his hand and a translucent ball of light appeared in his hand. Galji, Belle, Aurora, and Gria could be vaguely seen in the ball of light. This is just a simple sealing boundary formed by Lune runes. You should be able to open it easily. As for why he treated Galji like this, the three of them and a griffin were indeed not small. It was really not good to hand them over to White Yiksha. This way, they were sealed in a ball of light and handed to White Yiksha. It was also convenient for White Yiksha to carry them around. Thou is thoughtful. White Yiksha took the ball of light that sealed Galji and the others. He took out the gift card and the ball of light disappeared with a wave of his hand. After I'm done with this, I'll lock them up in the East prison. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's mission was completed, but Wu Ming showed no signs of leaving. Is there anything else? I have to leave Hakata for a while. As if he was waiting for White Yiksha to say this, Wu Ming immediately answered after White Yiksha asked. It's not like thou hast never left before, White Yiksha complained. Or are thou preparing not to come back for a long time this time? White Yiksha hit the nail on the head. After all, my purpose in coming to Hakata was to find my body. Since my body has been found, I should go and deal with my enemy. This enemy, Wu Ming referred to Gidia. Even without the Black Origin mud, Gidia was already considered a tyrant in the Type Moon world. With the Black Origin mud, it could be said that Gidia had become even more terrifying. Wu Ming was not afraid of an enemy like Az Dakaha who only used the Black Origin mud as a weapon, but it was impossible for someone like Gidia to only use the Black Origin mud as a weapon. Simply put, it was the difference between a magician and a magician. Magicians only used magic as a weapon, but magicians would delve deeper into it. If Gaia were to delve deeper into the Black Origin mud and discover something that would allow her to completely master it, it would be very troublesome. Wu Ming had to take the initiative to attack Gidia before Gidia made a move. In that case, the reason thou came to find me is very clear. Without a doubt, Wu Ming wanted to ask White Yiksha about the Dragon of Origin before leaving. White Yiksha's expression became serious. With a light wave of her hand, the place where the two were changed. White Yiksha brought Wu Ming to a special space. In the distance was a large white snow mountain. Wu Ming and White Yiksha stood on a plain that resembled ice. A trace of light shuttled through the mountain range in the distance. In the distant horizon, one of the venues of White Yiksha's gift game. I don't know much about the Dragon of Origin. I can only provide you with some information. Putting away her usual playful expression, White Yiksha straightened her attitude and looked at Wu Ming. That's right. White Yiksha brought Wu Ming here to tell Wu Ming about the Dragon of Origin. That was a long time ago. It was so long ago that it was longer than my lifespan. As for why White Yiksha said that, it was because, when I first gained sentience, I accidentally saw the Origin Dragon. As if recalling the past, White Yiksha's aura became slightly in line with her age. That was at the end of the day. I didn't know how I discovered the other party. At the same time, the thought of "this is the Dragon of Origin" automatically appeared in my mind. Although the other party noticed me, it only glanced at me lightly. There was no emotion in its eyes. After that, it immediately left as though it was just passing by. Turning her head to look at Wu Ming, White Yiksha continued speaking. I didn't feel that feeling from thee, but judging from the appearance, thy body is exactly the same as the dragon of Origin's body that I saw. It's just that the size is different, and there's another very important point. White Yiksha flew into the air and looked at Wu Ming. The dragon of Origin I saw was much stronger than thee. Even at that time, I felt that I wasn't its match. One had to know that the original White Yiksha was not White Yiksha, but the White Knight Monarch. It was a powerful existence whose spirit lattice had not been shrunk. The dragon of Origin that White Yiksha mentioned made the White Knight Monarch feel that he was not its match. Without a doubt, the other party must be an existence that exceeds a single digit. White Yiksha judged. By the way, White Yiksha, are there no single-digit existences in Hakata? Chapter 887. Wu Ming had been in Hakata for a while and had seen existences with 3 to 7 digits. Although White Yiksha had fallen from 2 digits to 4 digits because he had converted to Buddhism, Wu Ming had a rough understanding of the strength of 2 digits after fighting with Az Dakaha. After all, Az Dakaha, who had the black soil root, could no longer be in 3 digits. He had almost displayed the strength of 2 digits, but Az Dakaha's essence was still in 3 digits. However, Wu Ming had never heard of or seen the existence of a single digit. In the ancient books in No Name's underground library, Wu Ming had not found any content related to a single digit. Therefore, Wu Ming could not help but be curious about a single digit. Actually, from 3 digits onward, you can't divide them according to strength. You have to look at your own spirit lattice. Logically speaking, below 3 digits, you had to look at your spirit lattice to divide them. However, spirit lattice below 3 digits did not have an overwhelming effect on strength. Therefore, from 3 digits onward, you had to divide them according to strength. If your spirit lattice reached 2 digits, your strength would naturally be in 2 digits. Of course, there were those without spirit lattice. At that time, you could only look at your own strength. For example, 16 Knight's essence was human. In addition, there were no traces of spirit lattice on 16 Knight's body. Logically speaking, 16 Knights should be in the 7 digits. However, 16 Knights had an inhumanly strong physique. This allowed 16 Knights' strength to be in the 4 digits. Therefore, 16 Knights' strength was in the 4 digits. However, for an ordinary human to have the strength of 4 digits, 16 Knight's body probably had some hidden power that he had not figured out. In any case, that was what Wu Ming believed. After that, let's take a look at Az Dakaha. If a million gods surrounded Az Dakaha and Az Dakaha activated Avesta to copy the strength of the million gods into himself, Az Dakaha's strength would instantly reach 2 digits. However, under normal circumstances, Az Dakaha's spirit lattice would still be in the 3 digits. Therefore, Az Dakaha's strength in Hakata was a 3-digit demon king who would not cower in the face of a 2-digit enemy. In short, not having a spirit lattice did not mean that one was weak. However, the stronger the spirit lattice, the stronger one was. As for the single digit you mentioned, there is none. With this foreshadowing, White Yiksha's answer to Wu Ming was much easier. None. Wu Ming was stunned. I can't say that there aren't any. 1-digit numbers do exist, but they're no longer creatures with self-awareness. They're things like laws. Since 1-digit numbers were something similar to laws, in that case, Hakata's strongest combat power is only in the 2 digits, right? Wu Ming deduced. You are not stupid. However, Hakata's 2-digit numbers are very rare. There are only 17 in total. As for the 2-digit level, do you know Shakyamuni? That bald donkey belongs to the 2-digit category. This made Wu Ming come to a realization. It turned out that there were only 17 2-digit numbers in Box Ting. It was indeed as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. However, if the founder of the world's three major religions like Shakyamuni had a two-digit number, then the main gods of other myths and religions' founders would probably have a three-digit number. After all, there were only 17 two-digit numbers. However, Hakata had 100 god groups. There were very few god groups that could have a two-digit number. However, three-digit god groups were almighty. Therefore, most of the main gods of the god groups should have a three-digit number. Only a very small number of the main gods of the god groups should have a four-digit number. Ordinary gods would have a five-digit number. Therefore, Hakata had said that Absolute Evil's clone body had the strength of a god. After all, most of Absolute Evil's clone bodies had a five-digit number. A six-digit number was in existence with some ability. A seven-digit number was probably an ordinary person. That's why I've never heard of the existence of a single-digit number after being in Hakata for so long. This suspicious point had been resolved. No, if it were now, there would still be a single-digit number, White Yiksha said as he stared at Wuming. Are you referring to me? Wuming pointed at himself. I'm referring to you. White Yiksha smiled knowingly at Wuming. Didn't you reveal your true body when you destroyed Az Dakaha? Although I don't know how you hid your spirit lattice, your body leaked a trace of the aura of a spirit lattice. Based on that aura, I can determine that even if I return the Godhead and retrieve the spirit lattice, I won't be your match. Furthermore, it will be an overwhelming victory. Without a doubt, you aren't on the same level as us. You are undoubtedly a single-digit number. The so-called spirit lattice referred to heritage and merit. Hyunryong's heritage was Hyunryong's, and the Villow's merit was the Villow's. Sawdrake was considered a figurehead. As the root dragon, Wuming didn't have any heritage or merit. Logically speaking, he didn't have a spirit lattice. Therefore, it wasn't that Wuming had hidden his spirit lattice, but that he really didn't have one. However, White Yiksha said that she had sensed it. As the root dragon, Wuming wasn't bound by the box court. Wuming guessed that his own status had replaced the spirit lattice, causing White Yiksha to make the wrong judgment. However, if one really only looked at Wuming's status, Wuming was indeed higher than any existence in the box court. At this moment, Wuming was an existence that was only one step away from entering the adult stage. Although he had not taken this crucial step, Wuming would definitely not be in the double digits now. After all, his hypostasis had been liberated to the maximum. In that case, he would definitely be in the single digits. However, you are much weaker than the root dragon I first encountered. Even so, I can determine that you aren't a two-digit number, but an existence higher than that. As a former two-digit number, White Yiksha's judgment was definitely correct. Although it was unbelievable, it was completely confirmed that Wuming was a one-digit number. After that, did you not see the root dragon again? Wuming asked again. The next time I saw you was you. Speaking of which, when I saw your true body previously, I couldn't recall it because it was too long ago. However, I kept feeling that it was déjà vu. Fortunately, I'm not that old. I still remember. White Yiksha opened her fan and waved it twice proudly. Then let's end it here. Since White Yiksha had nothing else to say, it was time to end it. No name, I will use my methods to take care of them in secret, but I still have to ask you to take care of them. Wuming's secret care was not as effective as White Yiksha's, the local snake's, care on the surface. You don't have to worry about this. Just based on the fact that you defeated Absolute Evil and No Name's performance during this period of time, No Name can be raised by a single digit to 6 digits. Furthermore, I'm prepared to give No Name the authority of a region ruler. The community's hierarchy was related to the entire community. It wasn't something that could be promoted just because one person made a significant contribution. However, 16 knights and the others had indeed contributed a lot to No Name during this period of time after coming to the box court. Just the matter of defeating absolute evil's avatar was enough. Their strength had also been recognized by the lower 6 or 7 digits. With Wu Ming's defeat of absolute evil as an opportunity, No Name would have no problem rising to 6 digits. As for the region ruler, there was no need to mention it. No Name was originally a region ruler, and now it had the strength. White Yiksha was just returning it to its rightful owner. Then I'll leave it to you. Chapter 888. After bidding farewell to White Yiksha, Wu Ming returned to No Name in the East District. After all, even if he wanted to leave, he had to at least let his companions know. What was rare was that Wu Ming did not directly use the teleportation gate to enter No Name. Instead, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at a place that was still some distance away from No Name. Wu Ming was prepared to walk into No Name on foot, treating it as an experience. After all, I don't know when I'll be back again. Wu Ming finished speaking and walked towards No Name. The first thing that entered Wu Ming's eyes were naturally the 2 stone giants guarding the door. Then, Pest appeared in front of Wu Ming's eyes. Pest. Pest stood at the door, as if he had guessed that Wu Ming would go through the main entrance and quietly waited for him. Master, Senior Letitia asked me to wait for you here. Pest called out with some reluctance and even bowed. However, due to Wu Ming's abuse of power, Pest did not dare to be rude. He had always listened to Wu Ming and the others in No Name. As expected, he guessed it in the end. Wu Ming revealed a half-helpless and half-happy smile. He was helpless that his actions had been guessed. It was really contradictory that his companions could guess his actions. Let's go, Pest. Wu Ming did not say anything else. Since that was the case, the others in No Name probably knew that Wu Ming was preparing to leave. After all, Wu Ming had come to the box court to find his body. Since he had already found it, there was no need for Wu Ming to continue staying. Master, are you leaving? Although Wu Ming knew that Pest definitely knew about this, Pest's bluntness still surprised Wu Ming. That's right. Speaking of which, who guessed that I was leaving first? Wu Ming also asked without mincing his words. 16 Knights in reverse. Pest had no intention of hiding anything and went straight to the point. It had to be said that the 2 of them were indeed a master-servant duo. They were really straightforward. Upon hearing Pest's reply, Wu Ming thought to himself, as expected. In the current No Name, other than Wu Ming, only 16 knights had such a brain. However, Wu Ming knew that he was going to leave soon, so he didn't care about this. Forget it, I'll do as you wish today. After that, Pest didn't say anything. He just obediently led the way for Wu Ming. Speaking of which, did they hold a banquet? It doesn't look like he's in the house, and he even asked you to lead the way. It was obvious that Pest wasn't leading Wu Ming in the direction of the house. Instead, the 2 of them were circling around No Name's house. It looked like they were heading towards the back of the house. Yes, Senior Letitia and the others have prepared a banquet for Master. Firstly, it's to celebrate Master defeating absolute evil. Secondly, it's to bid Master farewell. Wu Ming nodded silently. If that was the case, the entire No Name would be present. It was no wonder that it wasn't in the house. After all, even if No Name didn't have many members, there were still more than 100 of them. Most importantly, most of them were children. Compared to holding a banquet in the house, it was more comfortable to hold it in the open air. It could be said that they were considerate of the children. Wu Ming turned his gaze and saw Pest's frail, childlike figure. Although Pest was the Demon King, he was only pushed to the front by the 80 million wraiths who died from the Black Death as their representative and sat on the Demon King's throne. To be honest, Pest was just a child. Pest, have you mastered 4-digit strength recently? Wu Ming's tone was like an elder caring for a junior. Hearing Wu Ming's words, Pest froze for a moment and his footsteps slowed. But shortly after, Pest regained his composure and continued walking forward. Are you wondering why I care about you? Wu Ming, who saw through Pest's thoughts, asked again. Yes. Pest, who was walking in front of Wu Ming, nodded and replied softly. Thinking about it, it's not strange at all. You're my servant, so of course I care about you. Little did he know that Wu Ming's words could easily cause misunderstandings. Although Pest wouldn't misunderstand, these words were still jarring to Pest's ears. Pest stopped in his tracks and spoke with a heavy tone. But I'm only a slave of the master of no name. Pest didn't care about Wu Ming's identity and began to throw caution to the wind. After all, she was the Demon King who was defeated by Wu Ming. She was a defeated Demon King who belonged to no name. To be honest, although there was a saying that a defeated Demon King would be included in the community of the person who defeated them, this rule wasn't mandatory. If the community didn't need it, they could reject it. From Pest's point of view, the reason she was included in no name was because no name currently lacked combat power. If that wasn't the case, what awaited Pest would be death. Now that the community lacked manpower, Pest was included, so she was no different from a slave of no name. Previously, when Wu Ming was talking about his experiences in the Northern District in the chat room, although Pest was present, she didn't speak. She only listened quietly as if she didn't have the right to speak. In the end, it was because of this reason. However, this was Pest's personal opinion. In fact, no one in no name thought of Pest as a slave. Not even the slightest bit. Since she was part of the community, everyone was a family. Back then, Letitia joined no name because she was defeated by the main force of the previous generation of no name. Now, Letitia was completely integrated into no name. She didn't look like a slave at all. Instead, Black Rabbit treated her intimately and even called Letitia Senior. First of all, we don't mean to treat you as a slave. That's just what you think. Wu Ming used his status as Pest's master to walk to Pest's side and rub Pest's little head with his large hand, as if telling Pest not to think too much. No one in no name has ever ordered you around, right? And I didn't give you any unreasonable orders. Moreover, Wu Ming didn't give Pest many orders. Ever since he summoned Pest, Wu Ming had been running around outside and didn't see Pest much. You have to work hard to communicate with the others in the community, Pest. However, Pest didn't seem to care. I don't think I can communicate with the people of the community who killed my companions and enslaved me. That was true, but Pest was still a child. In this regard, Wu Ming could only sigh silently. Then, Wu Ming quietly reached his hand into the golden ripples that had opened up at some point and searched for something. Then, Wu Ming placed the item in front of Pest. Here. Chapter 889. What appeared in front of Pester was a bunch of cotton candy. Pester was stunned when she saw the cotton candy. This reminded her of the first time she met Wu Ming. At that time, Wu Ming had also bought cotton candy for her. She had to admit that the cotton candy was quite sweet. Let's not talk about how you are with the others for now. We have to get closer to each other. This cotton candy was bought by Wu Ming the last time. It was kept fresh by magic, so it had been left in Wu Ming's space. However, Pester didn't take it and turned her head to the side. Also, about your companions, if you use the method I used to summon you, they will definitely respond. However, when Wu Ming finished speaking, Pester was clearly stunned. You need a holy relic, right? I don't have their holy relic, Pester said in a fit of pique. La Ting's case wasn't too bad. The flute she used was left behind, but it had been confiscated by White Yiksha. It was difficult to find it back. As for Wei Shi, he really didn't leave anything behind after disappearing. You should have seen how powerful your master is, right? Even without the holy relic, I can still find them. This is the agreement between you and your master. Trust me. To put it simply, Wu Ming was prepared to use the Great Origin to continue cheating. As someone who had seen Wu Ming's main body the moment they formed the contract, Pester naturally understood that Wu Ming was special. Since it was a promise made by such a person, it definitely wouldn't be a lie. However, Pester still seemed to be a little hesitant. She moved her small hand and wanted to grab the cotton candy in front of her, but she couldn't make up her mind. Take it. Wu Ming grabbed Pester's hand and placed the cotton candy stick in her hand. If you need anything in the future, just tell your master. I'm your master. Although Pest was summoned as an Avenger, it didn't mean that he had revenge in his heart. It was just that the Avenger job was most suitable for him. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he didn't care about Pest's reaction. He held Pest's hand, which was still holding the cotton candy, and headed towards their destination. At this moment, Pest felt his heart warming up a little. Pester raised his head slightly and looked at Wu Ming. He started to think that his master wasn't that bad after all. One more thing. You have to build a good relationship with the other members of the community. Don't keep a straight face all the time, got it? Wu Ming was like a long-winded father, constantly reminding Pest. But Pest couldn't refute that. I got it. The favorability points that he had just added dropped instantly. Before this, Pest was ready to go all out. Even if Pester angered Wu Ming with her words and Wu Ming wanted to kill her, it didn't matter. But now, her words were restricted. In addition, Wu Ming was Pest's master. In short, Pest couldn't raise his head in front of Wu Ming now. However, when Wu Ming saw Pest's helpless expression, Wu Ming also felt helpless. Forget it. Let's take it slow. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day. He didn't want to force Pest. As long as there was change, it didn't matter if it took a long time. However, just as Wu Ming and Pest were chatting, the two had already arrived at their destination. As everyone knew, as the largest community in the Lower East District, No Name's land was very vast. Behind No Name's castle-shaped building, there was a large open space. No one knew what it was for, but it was very spacious. At this moment, dozens of tables were placed on the originally spacious ground. The tables were covered with a not-so-fancy tablecloth. Plates of different shapes and sizes were placed on the tablecloth, and on the plates were various delicacies from the box court world. Did you rob someone? Wu Ming couldn't help but shout when he saw this scene. After all, there were so many sumptuous delicacies. Whether it was the appearance, color, or even the aroma that Wu Ming smelled, it all represented the value of these delicacies. How could it be a robbery, Mr. Villo? Everyone bought these from a high-class restaurant together. Black Rabbit's very recognizable voice came from behind Wu Ming. Wu Ming turned his head. More than 100 people stood not far behind Wu Ming. Without a doubt, after seeing Wu Ming arrive, they secretly came out from the nearby building. Although Wu Ming used his psychic ability to detect them, he had to pretend that he didn't know. Among the community members, most of the children were lined up like bushes. Compared to these children, Black Rabbit, 16 Knights, and the others clearly had the advantage of height. Even Letitia in her lowly form was half a head taller than these children. Perhaps, only Ren and Pest were as tall as these children of the community. Oh, Pest is actually holding hands with the Villo. Jiuyu and Asuka looked at Pest, who was holding hands with Wu Ming, as if he didn't care about the situation. There's a situation. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the three-furred cat, said simply, but the gossipy look in his eyes proved that this guy and Jiuyu and Asuka were both problematic children. Hearing this, Pest also reacted. He immediately shook off Wu Ming's hand and shrunk to the side. I think the two of you have nothing better to do. Wu Ming looked at Jiuyu and Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki as if he had already given up. The heavens took pity on him. He really didn't have any messy thoughts about Pest, but being ridiculed by others really made Wu Ming a little unhappy. Wu Ming stopped looking at Joyuan Osaka and Hiroi Hiroyuki and looked at Ren and Black Rabbit. Since I'm already here, don't let the children stand there like idiots. Hurry up and eat. After all, they were supposed to celebrate and send off Wu Ming, so they had to let Wu Ming speak first. Otherwise, they would have already started eating. They didn't need to wait for Wu Ming. Wu Ming's sharp eyes noticed that many children were salivating. They hadn't eaten such good food in the past 3 years. It was the same even 3 years ago. After all, 3 years ago, most of their teeth weren't fully grown yet. Naturally, they couldn't eat such delicious food. More importantly, 3 years ago, some of the children didn't even know how to walk yet. In short, they were basking in Wu Ming's glory today. Alright, everyone. Since Mr. Villo is here, let's start the banquet. Oh, oh, oh. The cheers of the children seemed to break through the sky. This made Wu Ming feel a little deafened. Sure enough, the children were hot-blooded and their voices were loud. Under Black Rabbit's encouragement and lead, the children, including Ren, happily ran to the front of the tables and began the long-awaited journey of delicious food. Chapter 890. Even Pest was squeezed to the edge of the table by the crowd of over 100 children. However, Pest, who had never faced such a situation before, was instantly at a loss. He glanced at Wu Ming from time to time, trying to seek help from Wu Ming. However, only Wu Ming's lips responded to Pest, "Eat as much as you can." If it was said that some of the children in No Name had enjoyed such delicacies before, then Pest was the only one who had never seen such a sumptuous meal in front of him. After all, Pest couldn't even fill his stomach when he came to the box court. After coming to the box court, Pest, who was bent on revenge, had never enjoyed such delicacies before. The considerate Wu Ming naturally wouldn't stop Pest from enjoying the delicacies. Pest looked at Wu Ming resentfully and was still hesitating. But soon, Pest was surrounded by Lily and a few other warm-hearted children. He half-willingly and half-forced to enjoy the delicacies with them. As expected, they are a bunch of children. Wu Ming looked at this heartwarming scene and was in a rather good mood. Although it's a banquet held with the excuse of celebrating you, that's just a passing remark. It's actually just to let the children of the community enjoy a rare celebration. 16 Knights walked to Wu Ming's side and crossed his arms behind his head. He looked at the children of the community eating heartily with a smile on his face. I don't know when our Lord 16 Knights has become so arrogant. Wu Ming crossed his arms and looked at 16 Knights with the same gaze that Juyu Asudara and Kasuga Yayoi used to look at Wu Ming and Pest, mocking him. Oh, you want to play games with me? I'm very confident. 16 Knights' eyes flashed as he looked directly at Wu Ming. I don't want to play games with you. Wu Ming spread his arms and looked like he was surrendering. What a joke. Who could beat a problem child when it came to talking? Wu Ming would not ask for a snub. By the way, when did you start preparing? Wu Ming was naturally referring to the banquet in front of him. The dozens of tables of delicacies in front of him must have taken a lot of effort. Even if he counted from the time Wu Ming left to find White Yiksha, time was rather tight. Letitia, who did not participate in the banquet and was standing behind Wu Ming, suddenly spoke up. Master, actually, everyone has been planning this banquet to celebrate the community's continuous progress. It's just that you didn't know about it. Because they had already started preparing, the members of No Name were able to prepare these delicacies in such a short period of time. At the same time, it was precisely because 16th Night had already started preparing for it that celebrating and sending off Wu Ming was really just a matter of convenience. In other words, 16th Night wasn't lying. Ahem. Indeed, we should hold a banquet like this. Wu Ming ignored 16th Night's teasing gaze as he coughed. Since the community had begun to develop steadily, they could not always lead a hard life. How could it be that they were eating chaff when they had a house full of gold? Of course, no matter what, it had to be done in moderation. By the way, since it's a banquet, Letitia, there's no need for you to be my maid anymore. Join the banquet with Black Rabbit and the others. Look, aren't they greeting you? Wuming was not wrong. Black Rabbit, Lily, Ren, and many other children of the community, as well as Jo Yuasuke and Kasuga Hikari, who had already joined the banquet, were all greeting them from time to time. I'm afraid they're calling for you, Master. Letitia playfully retorted. Letitia's words were not without reason. They might actually be calling for Wuming and the other two who had not yet joined the banquet. At that moment, Wuming could only smile and shake his head helplessly. Let's go. Although you're just a matter of convenience, we're still here to celebrate and send you off. After 16th Night finished speaking, she ignored Wuming and went straight to the banquet. I really don't know what to do with you guys. After all, Wuming had already said that he would follow the wishes of everyone in the community. If that was the case, then it was better to comply. Not sure if it was the universe or some other special space that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were large transparent yet opaque balls arranged in a regular pattern. A meteor was moving forward at a speed that normal people would not be able to see. It seemed as if there was no end to it. This was the gap between the worlds, a special space that had no end. Between the worlds. And that meteor was Wuming, who had left the box garden world. After happily attending the banquet, Wuming interacted with his no-name companions for a while, gave Letitia and Pest some instructions, and chatted with 16 Nights Reversal for a while. After that, Wuming left in an extremely natural manner, as though he was going out. There were no excessive goodbyes, no complicated words. It was really as if he was going out for a normal trip. At most, it could be considered as a long trip. Wuming left just like that. The main force of No Name understood that Wuming's long trip this time was not simple. However, no one directly said it out loud. Instead, they treated it as normal. They did not think that Wuming would really not return. They all believed in Wuming and believed that he would definitely return soon. Just like what Wuming had said to White Yiksha and Vera previously, it was fine as long as they trusted Wuming. There was no need to care about anything else. And 16th Night, Black Rabbit, and the others did the same. As for why, perhaps, this was what they meant by companions. Wuming collected his scattered thoughts, shook his head, and suppressed these thoughts. He then increased his flying speed. Because Wuming's body had spent a long time in the box garden world, his entire dragon body had been greatly strengthened. Therefore, even if he did not deliberately activate his phoenix transformation and only revealed his original body, it was already easy for him to reach this speed. At this moment, Wuming was preparing to use his body to fly through the gap between the worlds to return to the route. Because Wuming's backup machine was guarding the route, the entire route was hidden. Even the entrance was not the one that Wuming had seen before. Apart from using a special method to enter, or Wuming removing the route's concealment, there was no other way to enter the route. However, Wuming's backup machine inside the route was like a lighthouse that guided Wuming through the fog at night. Wuming only needed to rely on his senses to constantly move forward, and he would be able to reach the route. For example, Wuming did not know what was going on. All he saw was the scenery around him blurring, and Wuming had returned to the route. Chapter 891. It felt as though he had fallen into an environment, but Wuming knew that it was just a special way for Wuming to enter the route through his backup machine. The route was still the same universe, and there were not many changes. On the platform at the center of the route, a white dragon that was smaller than Wuming's curled up body and spread its wings. It lay there quietly as though it was asleep, but at the same time, it looked like it had lost its life. In short, it was quite contradictory. That was Wu Ming's backup machine. It wasn't wrong to say that it was alive, but it wasn't wrong to say that it wasn't alive either. If you really had to name it, it was a mechanical life form mixed with magic. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Wu Ming flew to the platform naturally. The small platform automatically expanded a little after Wu Ming flew over, just enough to accommodate Wu Ming and his backup machine. Even so, the space around them did not change at all, as though it was infinite space. That was not wrong. After all, this was the root, and there was no concept of size in the space inside. Not to mention space, there was not even the concept of time. It was just like the root of the M-shaped moon, where everything was chaotic. The root was essentially the same. Apart from Wu Ming and the root black mud, which was born from the root, no one could walk out of the root alive after entering. After landing on the platform, Wu Ming had no intention of putting away his backup machine. He continued to let the backup machine act as the host and take control of the root. After all, Wu Ming would have to leave again soon. Although it doesn't feel real, I've become a lot stronger. Looking at the backup machine next to him, Wu Ming could feel that his body had indeed grown a lot in size at such a close distance. Compared to the backup machine in the root, Wu Ming was now many times bigger. Wu Ming even felt like the backup machine beside him was a figurine. Although Wu Ming's body could freely expand or shrink, the size of his body in the realm of worlds was something that Wu Ming subconsciously controlled. In other words, Wu Ming's current size was what Wu Ming subconsciously thought was appropriate. This meant that Wu Ming's strength had also increased by leaps and bounds. After confirming the increase in his strength once again, Wu Ming made up his mind. It was time to find trouble with Gidia. But before that, Wu Ming had to act on the promise he made in the box world. He had to help Pest summon Wesley and Latine, punish the person behind Galji's words, and finally, and most importantly, the problem of absolute evil in the box world. However, Wu Ming didn't intend to let himself handle these matters. Wu Ming was going to let Collis help Wu Ming with these matters. It wasn't that Wu Ming was lazy. Collis could totally do it, and the results might be several times better than Wu Ming's. Collis's brain alone was hundreds of millions of times faster than a human computer. In addition, Collis was a product of the mysterious realm, so her efficiency was many times higher than Wu Ming's. She could do these things with half the effort. That was why Wu Ming had the idea of letting Collis do it for him. When Collis and Wu Ming's bodies were lost in the box world, Wu Ming was troubled by certain things. Now, he had finally found Collis. If everything was left to Collis, what would Wu Ming do? Wu Ming was naturally going to make a trip to the seventh singularity. As early as when Wu Ming obtained his dependent avatar, he could already multitask. In other words, even if his consciousness stayed in the root, he could still control the spirit base avatar to go to the singularity in real time. It was just that Wu Ming didn't like to do it. Wu Ming felt that it was a little perfunctory. If he got used to it, he was afraid that the future Wu Ming would become a central processing machine. Although it would not cause schizophrenia, Wu Ming still liked to put all his consciousness into the spirit base avatar and use it to encounter anything in the singularity. Such words made Wu Ming feel like he was more like a human than the mysterious and noble origin dragon. Taking a step back, Wu Ming had already left the trivial things to Collis to prepare. If he stayed in the root, he would have nothing to do. So, he might as well put all his attention into the spirit base avatar and seriously deal with everything that he encountered. I suffered a big loss at Gorgon's hands. How can I not get back at him? After temporarily taking over control of the standby machine, Wu Ming lay on the platform. Some of the necessary details still had to be handled by Wu Ming himself. After that, he could leave it to Collis. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. According to Wu Ming's speculation, Tachika and the others should have reached the last singularity by now. Just in time. I can solve the problem of absolute evil while I'm at it. He decided to solve the problem of the singularity as soon as possible, and then go on a crusade against Gideon with Tachika and the others. Wu Ming stretched out his dragon claw and tapped the empty space in front of him. A naked spirit-based avatar appeared in front of Wu Ming, and the face was exactly the face of Wu Ming's human form. Then, Wu Ming spoke to Enkidu and Kalas. Enkidu, Kalas, I'm counting on you. Wu Ming meant for Enkidu and Kalas to accompany Wu Ming's spirit base to the singularity in the form of avatars. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the golden heaven lock wrapped around Wu Ming's dragon claw arrived in front of Wu Ming's spirit base like a swimming dragon, causing a series of clanking sounds. The wedge at the tip of the heaven lock gently tapped Wu Ming's spirit base. In an instant, a silver-white chain appeared on Wu Ming's body. Not only that, but the silver-white chain also had a hint of gold, which made it look quite extraordinary. From this, it could be seen that Enkidu had already connected his avatar to Wu Ming's spirit base. Next was Kalas's turn. Hum. A buzzing sound that sounded like an auditory hallucination appeared inside the great source. However, this wasn't an auditory hallucination, but rather the sound of Kalas's movements. Wu Ming even felt his head vibrating slightly. Instantly, an invisible and mysterious signal like an electric wave was emitted from the dragon horn headpiece on Wu Ming's head. In the next second, a headpiece that looked like a dragon horn crown appeared on Wu Ming's avatar's head, shining with a light that seemed to be full of wisdom. At this moment, Kalas had also completed the connection with Wu Ming's spirit base. Next, it's absolute evil. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.